is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome to AM Prime on WESN. My name is Jada McLeod. I thank you so much for starting your morning with me right now. So it is Thursday. So did you know that it's also World Environment Day? Yeah. Plastic pollution permeates every corner of the planet, even in our bodies in the form of microplastics. World Environment Day 2025 calls for collective action to tackle plastic pollution. You know, we always hear about the plastics are ruining the environment, the plastics are ruining the environment, and you know, on every corner of the earth there's somebody that's really passionate about this, and it can sometimes come across as a little bit of annoying, but it's a true thing, and we should be paying a little bit more attention to how many single-use plastics that we use every single day. So the United Nations is calling us to join the hashtag Beat Plastic Pollution movement, because together we can create a healthier future. So what they're asking is for you to head to your socials or just even tell a friend that today is World Environment Day and hashtag Beat the Plastics Pollution. Right, so before we jump into our first interview of the day, remember that you can, of course, find us on our YouTube, our Facebook, where you can leave your comments and suggestions for us to engage with you. If you're seeing up there on the screen, on Facebook, it's WESN TV or WESN CC on YouTube, or you can WhatsApp us at the number that you see on your screen. So head there now and engage with us as we go through our discussions for the day. All right, so today's a very special day. If you know anything about me, I love artificial intelligence. I'm a huge buff for it. I want to know everything that's going on in the artificial intelligence space. So a couple of weeks ago, we promised you guys that we were going to have somebody, an expert on to talk about artificial intelligence as it relates to education, specifically tertiary education. So today, we're joined by a notably remarkable mind operating at the intersection of technology and education, Dr. Amit Neil Ramkissoon, a proud product of the University of the West Indies. Dr. Ramkissoon holds a PhD in computer science with cutting-edge research in computational social systems, fake news detection, and data mining. His doctoral thesis, titled Veracity, a computational social system for fake news detection in infrastructureless social networks, reflects his commitment to tackling real-world problems using AI-driven innovation. He also holds a master's in computer science, where he developed a mobile application for Alzheimer's disease diagnosis, and a bachelor's in information technology. Dr. Ramkissoon has continually pushed the boundaries of how technology can serve humanity. What I also learned about him is that he has published 14 peer-reviewed papers, a book chapter, and a preprint to date. He is currently an editorial board member for the Primera Scientific Engineering Association. And as we explore the evolving role of artificial intelligence in our lives, this morning we are placing a focus on AI in tertiary education. Dr. Ramkissoon brings a rare blend of technical expertise and research depth in the conversation of how AI can transform learning, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but the wider Caribbean and beyond. So good morning, Dr. Ramkissoon. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am quite well. I hope everyone is well. And as I start off, I just wanted to lead in on the conversation on World Environment Day.
For sure.
Because it's strange that last night I bought dinner,
mm-hmm.
and I was just thinking to myself, I had like about 4 or 5 containers for myself and others.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking to myself, how much waste is in styrofoam and these containers that we purchase, and we're just going to discard them after.
Yeah.
And it's also an impact, just like the plastics that they have on the environment as well.
Yeah, I would agree, and I'm a somebody that engages in that as well. Sometimes, you're just hungry or you just want to get a quick something to drink, and it's efficient and it comes in something plastic, but then you have to toss it because you have no more use for it. So it's something that I want people to pay more mind to. So if you can, probably get a reusable bottle, something like that. And it's something so small. The onus isn't only on the individual, it's on, of course, bigger companies that are causing the most harm to the environment. But as an individual, that personal autonomy to just replace some reusable plastic stuff with something that's more reusable. And I would hope that you would agree.
Yes, I agree with you on that one. It's just it's small things that can help us to reach that goal, to try and help protect and preserve the environment.
I would agree right there. So, Dr. Amplia, I know it's pretty early. How are you doing this morning? What is usually your morning routine? How do you kickstart your own day?
My morning routine, as I normally tell my class, it's similar to that of what we call congestion control in networks. And congestion control in networks, if anyone has ever done it, they know that when you hit to a congestion, you normally drop down to 0, and then you go into what is called a slow start. And you increment back to trying to get back to possibly about half the level of the network congestion that there was before. So normally my morning is a slow start. That's why I brought that up.
All right. Because when you were going there, I was like, okay, I need to research what that is. Because I mean, you're essentially a scientist. You're a doctor. You know, you're an expert at certain things. So when you were talking, I was like, oh, I need to keep up. So can you just go over it a little bit more? How does it correlate to it being a slow start?
So in networking and on a network, when you have congestion, you have what is called congestion control mechanisms. And when the congestion control, the name of the congestion control mechanism is called CSMACD. And when this CSMACD activates, when you hit, when they realize that there is congestion or there's a collision in the network, all the network traffic drops to 0. When it drops to 0, then you incrementally increase the traffic to about half the rate that was previously known as. And that incremental increase is what you call a slow start. So that incremental increase to half the rate that was previously at. So that's the slow start period. And then you go to about half, and then if at that half you meet a congestion again, you drop down to 0, and then you increment again, and so forth. And that's how congestion control on networks operate.
Thank you so much. You explained that so well for me just now.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I guess it comes out as you being a teacher. It's right up your alley. Yeah.
I try my best. I try to use a lot of examples in my explanations.
So let's dive right into the topic of artificial intelligence. So I'm just going to briefly explain the importance of it, because sometimes when I tell people that artificial intelligence is the next big thing, it's something that we should be paying attention to, they're like, why? It's just Copilot, or it's just ChatGPT. It's nothing too big. But if you're an avid viewer of the show, you'd realize that we speak about advancements in AI quite frequently. And what we've realized is that AI enhances teaching and learning and supports research. It enables personalized learning, automates administrative tasks. I use it for that. Facilitates research, and as a student, it usually prepares us for the future, because AI is it's all in the workplace now. That the workplace is trying to figure out how to integrate AI into their systems. So by the time that the students go into the workforce, it's going to be full-fledged. So we're going to need to be able to know how to navigate and, more importantly, master it. So on the flip side, there are, and I'm sure you would agree with this, Dr. Amplia, ethical considerations, possibly even legal ones, where we're talking about the legislated implementation or integration of artificial intelligence into our education system, higher or tertiary education. But I'm not going to get too ahead of myself right now. So Dr. Amplia, as someone who has studied and has been in the research of AI for quite some time, how would you define the current relationship between AI and tertiary education?
Okay, so let's start with what is AI? AI is the latest buzzword, and everyone you talk to, everyone around the corner, everyone knows AI, right? You ask them, what does it stand for? They know artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence, though it seems like it just popped up in the 2020s or maybe late 2010s. Artificial intelligence has been around since probably 1950s and 1960s. And what we know today as artificial intelligence is actually called generative AI. But artificial intelligence, the core underpin artificial intelligence, has been around, as I said, since the 1950s, 1960s. You have things like expert systems, genetic algorithms, artificial neural networks. They've all been around. We've studied them. In preparation for this interview, I went and I dusted off one of my old textbooks that I have next to me, and I learned artificial intelligence at UE in around, that was 2011, right? And that's before we ever had any idea of this generative AI coming about. So artificial intelligence, to explain what it is basically a computer trying to simulate human knowledge. So a computer, and not knowledge per se, but human thinking and intuition. So you're trying to say that a computer basically can think like a human. It can create knowledge, it can make decisions like a human being. And that's what artificial intelligence is. And we're using human behavior to simulate that. The most common, and the most widely used method is what you call artificial neural networks. Once you hear the term neural, anyone out there, you should know that neural speaks to the brain.
Yeah.
Right, so what we have done is that in computer science, we realized that there are a lot of things that we can simulate from nature. All right, I myself work on nature-inspired algorithms for feature optimization. So realizing that, we said, okay, we can make the computer think like a human brain. So thinking like a human brain, we have created what's called an artificial neural network. An artificial neural network, you have neurons just like you have in your brain, and they're all connected to each other. In a very complex map, basically. If you look at the diagram for artificial neural network, it's a lot of lines just going all over the place. It's connected to a lot of dots, which are what we call nodes on the network. And this artificial neural network is basically made to map the thinking of a human being. So artificial neural networks, the underpinning of artificial intelligence, and you have things like expert systems, genetic algorithms. Genetic algorithms use the idea of evolution, and it's called evolutionary computing. And they use the idea of how evolution works, how our DNA swaps, and we have chromosomes and pieces go from here to there, and genes, and etc. And that uses that knowledge and that science to basically also create to have artificial intelligence. Now, let's come to the topic at hand. Generative AI came about in 2014, 2015, around there, right? And what made generative AI so explosive is now that you have artificial intelligence that basically could have been what's called unsupervised. You had previously you had a lot of supervised artificial intelligence. And supervised means is that you know what the input is, you know what the output is, but you want basically the system to figure out the middle. Yes. So I know I live in Chaguanas, I know where Port of Spain is, and now I want that the computer figure out how to get me from Chaguanas to Port of Spain. Right? And that's what the middle is there. So that's supervised learning. What has happened with unsupervised learning is that now you just provide the input. And you don't know where the output is going to be, but you just provide in this input and you allow the system to figure out the output, a lot of times via what is known as clustering, and then try to figure out the output. And that came with the rise of methods like generative adversarial networks, GANs, and autoencoders. These are unsupervised or semi-supervised learning methods. And because of the rise of these methods and the invention of these methods, they allowed now for the computer to basically think, for want of a better term, and basically figure out things on its own without you providing a labeled output for it. And this provided a whole new era for AI, and that's why we're in the world of generative AI. Generative AI actually gets its name from the fact that you have models like a generative adversarial network, a GAN, and that's where you get the idea of generative AI. And that has taken the world by storm, and that's where we are at today now with it. Now, in terms of, sorry, go ahead. My bad.
Just to clarify, generative is like derivative. from, it's learning from humans?
Well, it's learning, but it's also generating on its own. Now, and this is a debate that I had. It's coincidental that you contacted me for this interview, and having this conversation with two of my senior lecturers at UE, and the fact that does the computer really learn, and is it, and because how machine learning and AI works is that it uses prehistoric data, and using that prehistoric data, it then builds a model basically on that prehistoric data to predict future data, much like how weather forecasting works. The weather forecasting, they'll use that, okay, on the 5th of June, on the 5th of June for the last 20 years there has been sunshine, for the last month there has been sunshine, so we could probably predict that on the 5th of June today is going to have sunshine as well. So, and that's how machine learning normally works, and generative AI is built upon that. So, is the computer really learning? But then the computer as well is now using text. It's now taking text and transforming that text into understanding what you're asking. So you go to methods like, you go to powerhouses like things like ChatGPT and Gemini or Copilot and all of these, and you ask it, okay, help explain to me how does artificial intelligence fit into computer science? Just asking them, right? And it's able to manipulate that language using what we call text mining and knowledge engineering, and take that language and break it down into understanding what you ask, builds what is called a knowledge graph at the background, and it follows the lines of the graph to figure out exactly what you ask, and it's be able to then convert that using what we call natural language processing, and understand what you're saying, and then present a pretty accurate response to you. So then there is some sense of intuition in there. So that's the debate that we've been having. Is it really learning, or is there real intelligence, or is it just training? I mean, as I use my simplistic example, if you put your hand in a fire, and you get burnt, then the second time you see a fire, I doubt you'll put your hand in that fire again.
Okay.
So then therefore, now that's learning. You learned that my hand in the fire means burning, so therefore I will not do it. So that's the same thing as the machine does. So is that intelligence? Is it learning? And that's where the debate is at the moment. I could just assessment model on the whole, right? In terms of how you do assessments, in terms of even if you're doing online quizzes, probably put the answers as very as short answers or multiple choice questions, and so that you can try to frustrate the process in some way as to prevent the use of generative AI. Educate as well. Educate your students in terms of the harms of generative AI. Educate them on the positive. So encourage them, and that's the thing. If you encourage it and you make it less taboo, then we always try to get away with something that we find that you tell us not to do it, and we will try to get away with it because you just want to prove that you can. Yeah. So if you make it less taboo and you encourage it that these are the methods that you can use it in the classroom, but these are the methods that you should not, then it can help probably to sway the argument and sway the minds of students to help them to learn in a more efficient manner.
See, that was actually my next point in terms of embracing artificial intelligence in the classroom, because if I know myself, if my teacher is honest about saying he or she or they used AI to create a lesson plan or to help explain a topic to us, it would make me feel much more comfortable with saying, well, maybe I don't really understand the way you explained it. Let me use some sort of AI tool to explain it to me. For example, I know that there's this software that I personally use, but I can't remember the name right now, where you can put information into the system and it produces a podcast explaining it to you. That was such a big help for me during final examination.
Help them to let educators use it as part of delivering course material to students.
So do you think it's beneficial for the ICNTT to mandate that all education institutions must have a course that says fundamentals of learning for year 1 students? It's just a joke, but what do you think about that?
That might be a bad idea. We actually thought about having a course in terms of proper communication, fundamentals of communication with students, because jokingly enough, you should see some of the emails that we get from students, the way they address you and the language, because me trying to keep up with the language and learning all of these acronyms and what they mean, and it's just mind-blowing.
There was a teacher that I engaged with, lovely lady, and she had a whole class, not a whole class, but just ranting after class, ranting about that. Guys, communicate properly. She put out this example of how to send an email, because she was like, I can't understand you. How are we going to connect if I can't understand you? Just, as you said that, I remembered her mini rant to us one class evening. So as we begin to wrap up, I feel like we can go on for a while, just delving more into the topics that we spoke about, but this is kind of just hitting it's hitting the beginning of it. I'm hoping you would be open to coming back on to talk more in depth.
Not a problem at all. Whenever you guys are ready, you could always give me a shout, and I will be glad to come back on and help to explain, because this is such a complex topic. It's as I say, we talk about it as if it's something that came about recently. And as I pointed out, this has been around since the 1950s, 1960s. So we're talking about 60, 70 years of knowledge to try and discuss. There's a lot in there. So anytime that you're ready, I'll be glad to join you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramkissoon. All right, so if anybody wanted to connect with you to maybe learn more about something you spoke about today, or just connect with you in general, how may they do that?
You can follow me on all of my socials. Just Google, just search Amit Neil Ramkissoon, and you can get all of my socials out there.
All right, so that is Amit Neil Ramkissoon, AmitNeil Ramkissoon. Right?
Correct.
If anything, reach out to WESN, and well, you get me, and I'll get you the contact if you forget. But yes. Thank you so much for coming on and for offering your expert advice and knowledge to us. I enjoyed the conversation. I always enjoy a conversation about AI.
I hope it was educational. I hope it was on point, and I hope that your viewers learned something out of it.
I mean, I started learning from the moment you said congestion control about slow-paced learning. So yeah, I started learning from there, and I'm sure the viewers learned a lot today too. So again, thanks so much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Same to you, and everyone have a great day.
Yes. All right. So with that, we're just going to take a short break, and we will be right back with you. Stay with us. This is AM Prime on WESN.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Good morning and welcome back to AM Prime on WESN. So today we're just going to jump straight into our second conversation of the day. We are joined by the Acting Commissioner of Police, Junior Benjamin, to have a frank conversation about accountability and transparency within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The discovery of spent TTPS-issued shells at crime scenes have reignited public questions about how law enforcement weapons, ammunition and resources are being tracked, disposed of and secured. The Acting Commissioner has said there's a process now in place to reduce this kind of leakage. So this morning we hear more about that as we ask ourselves, are the systems in place strong enough to keep the criminals at bay and maintain trust? Good morning and welcome to the program.
Pleasant morning to you and pleasant morning to all your listeners.
So of course, how are you doing this morning? I know it's pretty early.
Yeah. Well, you know, my work normally starts early in the morning, so I'm good, I'm great, and I'm ready to go.
Yes, of course. But how are you making out as this rainy season? I'm hearing the rain outside.
Yeah, you know, in the midst of all of that, you know, even though it's rain on the outside, the sun has to shine on the inside because that's where hope comes alive. And therefore, you know, doesn't matter what happens on the outside, you know, police officers have to get up and we have to go and make sure that we do our job. So it's all well. It's all good.
Very inspiring. So my first question to you is, you said that there's now a system in place to sort of, okay, so recently some TTPS-issued shells were found at a murder scene. I think it was on June 6th. You made a statement that rounds found like these are from older stock that's made its way into criminal hands. So my question is, how can these spent shells be repurposed for use by criminals in the first place?
Well, the thing is, in the past, it seemed that there was a lack of systems to really track exactly the wrongs that were probably used by persons, whether police or otherwise, to go out there and that went into the hands of the criminals. Nevertheless, most of those wrongs that we are seeing, you know, we recognize might be from some old stocks prior to us putting those systems in place. And even presently, with the present systems that we have, we believe that we'll be able to, we have seen a drastic change for the positive, where there's a reduction of wrongs from police officers or from the police service that is found on crime scenes. So it means that our systems are working. How it got into the hands of the criminals, again, it's anybody's guess that it could be, you know, from probably corrupt police officers or even, you know, leakages from one way or the next. But we are about trying to stop the hemorrhaging, and we are putting necessary things in place to do that.
All right. So say it does get into the hands of major criminals, people looking to do bad with it. How are they going to use that? Why is it a cause for any concern?
Because when you see a homicide, you know, and you visit the scene and you recognize that it is shells from a TTPS wrongs, it then begs the question whether or not the person using it was a police officer, or even it brings that level of skepticism as to the legitimacy, you know, that the police service should have, because the police, obviously, we are not in the you know, in the job of taking lives. We are about saving lives. So when these things happen, certainly it will beg the question as to what is happening with the police service, and therefore there's a need for greater accountability, integrity, and transparency in the way the police we do our work.
The newer system that it was put in place to account for these rounds during, well, especially during police training, can you kind of walk us through the difference between, well, the process before and then now? So, because you said that it's working now. So, are you able to kind of tell us what you're doing differently?
All right, that's an excellent question. So, without giving out too much trade secrets, but I'll, you know, let me just see how I could put it. So, basically, in the past, when especially our training wing, they're going out, the wrongs would have been given to, you know, instructors, etc., to go out there, and you know, that in itself was basically what happened. If they used all the wrongs or they didn't, they would bring back the rest, etc. we have now put a totally different system in place where now the actual, from the firearm section, they actually go out with the rounds and they become the custodian of that round. And therefore, every single round must be accounted for by the custodian. And therefore, so there's a greater control, especially of knowing how many rounds was fired off on the range and how many rounds should be retrieved, etc. So we had a more direct approach that has been helping us tremendously. And we are going to continue that, in addition to the fact that we have, again, one of the things that we have done in the past and we are now seeking to continue it is the whole idea of ensuring that we have regular inspections of our firearms and ammunition in the stations to really seek to ensure that we account for the necessary firearms and rounds that is given to all the divisions and branches.
So it seems like the major thing that has changed is record keeping. You're doing a lot more record keeping. So why wasn't that done before? Because I remember in 2023 we had a similar conversation like this where persons were concerned about spent shells being found at crime scenes, and they was said that there was more processes being put in place. But then we didn't hear much about it really until, well, this article came out where you said that there are more processes being put in place. So why wasn't something like this, record keeping, being done before?
Well, again, I don't know if I can speak to before, because I can tell you where I am now and what we have put in place. What we recognize is that, in every dispensation, nearly everyone will have different ways in which they might want to deal with a situation, and hoping that it works. What we recognize is that what we have put in place certainly worked, because we've seen a decrease in the number of police spent shells that we're seeing on crime scenes. So certainly we know that our system, they are working. It's not perfect as yet. There's still, the tendency to we're still seeing 1-2 of those spent shells still popping up on scenes. So it's not foolproof, but nevertheless, we will continue to work on it until we get there. Understand that, again, there are many different things and anomalies that could play. One being that, a person could decide that, this is, I fired X amount of rounds and it didn't fire those amount of rounds. So we want to ensure that when these things happen, that we are able to literally be able to account for those things and put the systems in place to ensure that, neither by accident or by probably willful thought, that persons or police officers will go away with police rounds and probably use it for, ill-gotten gains.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this data is tracked? What supports this claim that, there's been a reduction?
But certainly, even if you see the numbers, in times past, nearly every crime scene you hear that there was a police rounds and so forth. You're not seeing that. You're not hearing that now. You will hear, ever so often that there were a police rounds or 2 might be found. In fact, you could probably count it on your hand how many times, for the year that we found police rounds on any crime scene, because certainly those times that you hear it is very, very, it's few. And even when it is done, it is all persons that are finding those rounds to say that we found the wrong. So one, it shows that the police service, we are not covering up anything. Once we find police wrongs, we state it. And therefore, that's the level of transparency that we are operating with. We believe that if we are going to, be the police service that the public will trust, you need to know the truth. And also with the truth, we also need to put the necessary measures in place to mitigate against those problems, so that at least the public know what we are doing to at least alleviate the problem in the future.
Would you say that internal audits have already resulted in disciplinary action or charges against officers who have been complicit?
Well, again, a lovely question again, but it's very difficult, first of all, to find out who probably had the wrongs, who gave the wrongs to, because, who did the shooting, unless you have a direct person that was caught in the act. So it's very, very difficult to do that. Nevertheless, what we are accustomed to doing on CSI, they would gather those wrongs and they would seek to look for fingerprint impressions and different things to see if we can come up with, and identify, persons. Where those things are done, then we are able to, with proper and, effective intelligence and also holistic investigation, we would be able to probably go further and see if we can find a person who is an accomplice in this case, and we'll let PSB deal with it.
Is it something that is that's serious, right, for the TTPS to take time to test these spent shells, look for fingerprints at the crime scene to...
And I would also like to add on to that question, who is responsible for the investigation of crimes like these or for stuff like this? Is it internal or is it an external party?
Well, whenever there's a homicide, again, we have the homicide bureau that they would deal with that. And again, when we deal with crime scenes, we have CSIs that deal with the crime scene and ensuring that these cartridges, etc., they are tested. Again, if you understand, anything about that, to find fingerprinting impressions might be a bit difficult, but it's certainly not impossible. Because on some crime scenes, we find the shells itself, sometimes we might find wrongs, but where there are wrongs, it's more likely that you will be able to get impressions on those wrongs. Where there's shells, it might be a little bit more difficult because, again, when you understand the process of finding and the whole idea of the fingerprint, it might be a bit more difficult to really extrapolate a fingerprint from that. But nevertheless, we continue to try. And the CSI, we have a system in place that they can seek to use it to see if there is any fingerprint impressions that could be found. Nevertheless, even with that, it is much more than the fingerprint impressions. We try to look at the wrongs, the cartridge itself, to determine whether or not it came out of a subsequent firearm because of the goose and the whole mechanics that goes with that ballistics. So that is also another reason why they collect it as well.
Is body cam surveillance something that can be used in an instance like this to try and kind of track which officer shot which area?
Yeah, body cams could be used again. Probably when we get that 3,000 body cam, we will be able to do that. But the little we have, we need to have it outside there for, again, at this time, for the patrols and also for the task force and the other areas out there. All right, so it's not something that we could do right now with that, but certainly body cams would always help because you're able to see exactly what is happening in front of you with the body cam, and therefore it acts as a protector and it also acts as a deterrent at the same time.
You would have spoken about certain loopholes within the old system that would have been exploited by officers. Can you, well, I don't want to say get into exactly what were those loopholes being exploited, but what do you think it says about the culture within the TTPS, and then how would you be working to addressing that? Because I think with every system, even the newer ones now, an officer can find another loophole.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Let me tell you, problem is spelled P-E-O-P-L-E. And therefore, if you understand that, it means that once you have people, you're going to find problems, you're going to find people trying to beat the system, and therefore you're going to always get that. So that is something that you have to understand whenever you're dealing with individuals you're going to find. But nevertheless, I'm saying the majority of the police officers, they are not the corrupt police officers. We stand with a level of integrity. We believe that we do our job without fear of favor, malice, or ill will. Yes, we have the few that would want to be deceptive, and once we are able to find them out, we deal with them decisively, and we have a no-nonsense approach to that, and we have zero tolerance to police indiscipline and corruption. So therefore, I stand firm on once we find out persons. It might be a little difficult, but the moment we are able to do that, and we are saying to the public, if you know you have information, please let us know, because if you let us know, we can be able to deal with these situations to ensure that we get rid of those persons who really seek to go foul of the law. As police officers, we must uphold the law and we must live by the law because we are not above the law.
How successful has these types of investigations been in the past?
Well, I can't say that we have been very successful. We have had situations where we are able to, again, you will see in PSB, the Professional Standard Bureau, they have arrested police officers for having excess wrongs in their possession and so forth. So it means that it works, and therefore they must account for why they have the excess wrongs. And we are going to continue to do all that we can do to ensure that our officers, abide by the laws. And we again encourage our officers to ensure at all times to obey the law, because anybody that runs foul of the law, we are going to deal with them.
Okay, I was kind of curious as to just what the difference is in terms of an arrest of a police officer versus an arrest of a regular citizen. Is there any difference?
Well, there's not any difference. I think that the real issue here is the fact that the processes might be different. While you arrest a citizen and you can bring them before a court of law, we have standing orders that guides us, standing orders 10 that guide us. It gives us a way for a police officer to go before the court. Even though he might be arrested, you have to do the investigation. You have to go before, carry it to the DPP, and the DPP must see that there is sufficient evidence before you can carry that person to court. So therefore, that is, just the process itself is slightly different, and therefore we must follow those processes before we actually bring that person to court. So it's not as easy as a normal person.
The same processes that govern the TTPS, would it be the same processes that govern, say, the TT regiment or any other government body?
Well, yes and no, from the standpoint that, again, the same standing orders we tell you with the Defense Force, you might not really need the DPP. That could be done by a senior officer to give the okay. But nevertheless, and again, don't quote me on that, because I think that they also have some stringent measures that can be that is also placed upon us to do prior to bringing those persons before the court. That being said, we continue to live very, very good with our Defense Force personnel, and therefore there would be a level of consultation that would also go into it, where we would seek to inform the CDS and all the other persons, so that there is that level of collaboration before we actually go carry that person to court.
So I know that we have to begin to wrap up, but I just want to understand a little bit more about the spent shells. I'm seeing here that it's possible that if it's still in good condition, it could be reloaded. So, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but if after a crime has happened, a shell is on the ground, and say somebody with bad intentions picks it up, can they almost repurpose it in a way where they can use it again, and the TTPS can get blamed for something that they didn't do?
Well, I think the ballistics experts might be able to tell you more about that. I'm not one really, but I can tell you that anybody that is found with those shells, whether you take it up by accident, whether you take it up to say, just to show somebody, once you leave, let's say, a range with those things, you are going to be charged with having, some form of ammunition. So you want to be very careful. And if you see those things, call the police. If you see it anywhere, call the police. Do not pick them up. Do not put them in your bag. Do not put them in your pocket. Because I'm saying, once you are found with them, you will certainly go before the court of law, and you will have to answer.
Even if it's like a 12-year-old kid that just picked it up, a child that just picked it up on the side of the pavement.
I'm saying even for a child, he or she will have to account. But nevertheless, the court has a particular way that they deal with children, but certainly ignorance of the law is certainly no excuse.
I kind of want to, before we wrap up, I want to just touch on another recent issue concerning the robbery at the airport. And I wanted to ask, what what are some of the things that that have been? Oh, let me rephrase my question. Yeah. So changes that have. My question is still not making sense. Hold on. Sorry. What are changes that have
being made to make sure that it's a different type? So it's something like that. What happened at the airport can't happen again.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can catch that. I hope that's the question. Is that the question?
You can answer that and
okay.
I'll gather my thoughts.
All right, no problem. That's okay. Yes. Yes. Certainly, we plan on ramping up the patrols in the airport. You're going to see more and more police presence, and I'm not just saying in the past. What we did in the first place, we had more mobile patrols passing by and so forth.
Yeah.
We're not going to ramp up that. You're going to see more static patrol. You're going to see police officers walking around in the very presence of the airport, both inside and outside. We are just going to ramp it up. You understand? This is our place of entrance where visitors come and people must feel safe. And we are saying that enough is enough. We believe that things has gone too far, and we are going to take a firm stand in ensuring that we totally secure the airports and ensure that all airports are safe for persons, visitors, as well as local citizens to go to the airport and do not be afraid of any form of crime taking place.
Right. So what kind of coordination exists now between the police service and airport authority to bridge the gap?
Well, even as we're talking today, I'm meeting with the head of the airport authority, along with his staff and also senior persons from the police service, and we are going to ensure that we are all on the same page. It is going to call for the airport authority to step up in terms of what they are called to do, and also for the police service also to step up. But certainly I can assure you it's going to be a symbiotic relationship. It's going to be one where we are going to be working together to ensure safety and security in the airport and also around that landscape.
Acting Commissioner of Police, I don't do this with any type of haste, but I must commend the openness that you've shown over the past couple of months, specific to this media station, but how open and transparent you've been. So as a leader of the TTPS right now, what does accountability look like to you?
Well, in terms of accountability, I live by that. I believe that in order for us to really be genuine, people need to know where we are, even as we look forward into where we want to go. The police service is not a perfect organization, but certainly I believe what people are looking for is not necessarily perfection, but they want to know that they can have a level of transparency so that they could know what is happening. We want to encourage that transparency by one, the way in which we treat people, so that we are going to, if you make a report, we must account to you. We must call and tell you what is happening with that report. I tell people, I put down there some systems that within a week time you should get a call, within 2 weeks after that another call, 2 weeks after that another call. At least you'll know what is happening. So there's a level of accountability. As we go into our town meetings and we go into a walkabout, station council meeting, it's all about us accounting to the people, so that these people know what is happening. A lot of time people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. So the more we reduce crime, it doesn't really change the face of the fear of crime. So we must change the fear of crime by the way that we treat people, and being accountable to them is one of the best ways to do it.
Being open and honest.
Yes.
Because I feel like that's something that we missed before. We didn't know about anything that was going on. I'm not blaming anybody, but we didn't know about things that were going on. So now being able to say...
Not enough was being said.
Yeah.
So now, we appreciate this from you. So we just had to make that clear.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks so much.
But actually, before we go, one final question. Are there any, because I know we do this a lot in Trinidad and Tobago, where we kind of mimic certain international benchmarks. So is there any specific country or models that, international model that the TTPS is looking at for guidance in terms of evolving the police service?
Well, I don't know if there's any one particular area. In fact, because Trinidad and Tobago we are influenced by so many different entities, and I'm saying that because we take some models from the UK, we take models from the US. We also look at our regional counterparts, Jamaica, different places. We are all working together and learning from each other. But at the end of the day, it's about having, that tailor-made system that will work for you. And that's what we're doing right now. We are putting systems that might be very much special to Trinidad and Tobago and our landscape. Where we are transshipment points. So certainly where you are will determine the type of strategies that you use. And also we use what we call intelligence-led, evidence-based, technology-driven solutions to crime. So therefore, it is really a multifaceted approach that is used to solve crime. And so far, it is working. To this point, I think we had over 169 murders compared to 249 last year. Nearly 18 less murders, and we are going to continue to push until we really see, some significant strides in that direction. But we're certainly heading in the right direction.
Okay. We'll hold you to account on that. When you adopt new processes, will you tell us?
Yes, certainly. And that's about part of being transparent. As we continue to grow, we tell you what works, what is not working. And we are going to hold ourselves. Once I am in the chair, I am certainly going to hold myself accountable to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, being transparent to the media, I think is so very important, because I'm not perfect, but certainly I believe with the help of God and with the work of the executive of the police service and all the members of the police service, we can make a big difference as we work together.
Thank you so much, Acting Commissioner of Police, Mr. Junior Benjamin, for joining us on the program this morning to talk all things accountability and transparency in the TTPS.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best to you too. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
All right. So we're just going to take a short break and we'll be right back with you, because we have a very exciting conversation, something that we've been working on for a while. Coming up next.
I told you guys about it. It's I don't want to say it's old news, but it's something that has been on, it was ongoing for some time. Minister Barry Padarath, he made comments about the ODPM.
It's been in the news cycle.
Yeah. So we are going to finally address that, touch on it, and give you some insight into that. So stay tuned.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement. If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
you would be surprised. A lot of the patients who present to us with infection in their feet, the infection would have started several days before. Now, the interesting thing is, neuropathy usually goes hand in hand with peripheral arterial disease. So these patients lose the sensation to feel. Now, they may have the ability to have crude touch or general sensation, but that fine sensation, for instance, when a needle sticks them or a thumbtack sticks them, they would lose that sensation.
Correct.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
In the studio now, you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
They believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Welcome back to the program this morning. So, with the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season starting, it started June 1st, I believe, we ought to understand, the role and the function of the ODPM. That's the, oh my gosh.
That's the topic of today. That's what's on everybody's mind. We have the role and the function of different state bodies, the first responders, but what is the role of the ODPM? That's what we want to understand today. One of the questions we'd like to answer.
So to help us unpack this, we have Lieutenant Commander Kirk Jean-Baptiste. He is the training and education specialist at the ODPM. So good morning, Commander Kirk.
Good morning, ladies, and how are you this morning? You all hearing me clearly?
Yes, we are.
Loud and clear. How are you doing this morning?
I'm all right. It's a little rainy, a little chilly, so I have on my little jacket.
I'm seeing you. Is it a puffy coat?
Yeah, it's a regular sweater.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's keeping me warm this morning.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thanks for joining us on the program this morning. Even though it is pretty rainy, it's what they call stay in your bed.
Stay in your bed
weather. Well, I'm in the office.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's beautiful to see.
So, as we start the conversation, can you start by reminding us and reminding our viewers about the core mandate of the ODPM and what is its role before, during, and after a disaster?
Okay, so basically the core role of the ODPM is that of a coordinating agency. All right, so the ODPM steps in after right? So there are levels. There's level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is handled by your management units from local government. So every region, the 14 regional authorities that we have, the 14 municipalities, the level 1 happens, your response is fire service and your disaster management unit. If disasters exceed the capacity of those regional corporations, right, that is when, and it reaches that level 2 declared, that's when the ODPM comes in and coordinates with all the resources within Trinidad and Tobago to continue managing and alleviating right up to the recovery phase of the disaster. So we would come in and we would coordinate with the Defense Force. We in all the ministries like Works and Transport, Planning and Development. So all those ministries, Defense Force, Fire, Police, T&Tech, the public utilities will be pulled in, and our National Emergency Operations Center will be activated. And that is where all those representatives, right, of a senior level in the organization would be, which is here in Tacarigua or in our alternative NEOC at Mausica, which is right there behind PriceSmart in Mausica, or just off the highway. And we would coordinate, right, with those agencies and with local government to ensure that things are done and things are carried out properly, right? So that's when we know, okay, we have a landslip, North Coast Road, who we sending, right? Which regional corp, who has the equipment for that, any injuries, fire gets involved, local, the ambulance services get involved, etc. So that's where the ODPM comes in. Level 3 is if it's beyond, if it's that bad, like what may have happened in Grenada with Beryl last year. CDEMA, we will have to look to CDEMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. And they are another coordinating agency that would coordinate with other countries to assist Trinidad and Tobago. Fortunately for us, we haven't hit level 2 in quite some time, right? The last level 2 we had would have been the oil spill in Tobago. And once the level 2 was declared, ODPM was, actually I took 2, looking at the dates on the board, I took 2 batches of volunteers, because the ODPM has volunteers as well, and staff, to Tobago in February and in March last year. I would have been in the Joint Operations Center with TEMA's Director Alan Stewart and other staff, and we had people out in the field helping shovel oil and suck up oil and do all the mandatory things that we had to do, right? So we haven't hit in terms of a storm a level 2 in. We haven't gotten to that stage in quite some time.
With seeing that we have not gone into, we haven't had that level 2 storm type of experience in a long time, would you say that it has made us, I guess,
nonchalant?
And not concerned too much, so we're not in the, readiness position as we should be?
Right. So the last major hurricane we've had was in 1963, right? It devastated mostly Tobago and eastern Trinidad, right? We've had a few things back in the 80s. We may have had something like about 10 years ago, but it has developed in us a culture that God is this Trini. And you would have seen, if you check back in your history, you would have seen a couple times we've been sent home half day, right? Because the storm is approaching, right? So we get these weather alerts from Met Office, right? So 3 days before a hurricane hits, right? or at least 8 hours before a tsunami hits, we are given warnings, and we send out on our public alert notification system, PANS, we send out warnings. This is approaching, and then we have countdown warnings, right, in terms of time. So we'll get like a 72-hour notice, right? And then we'll give out a 48-hour notice. It's still approaching. This is what's expected. Be prepared. The last time we got a little half day to go home and be prepared, people were liming in bars. People were hanging out. People were, they weren't concerned. They're not coming. God is a Trinity. We had 3 hours before the storm hit, the poor groceries getting crowded and bombarded with people, right? Local government office, right? As if those people working in the disaster management units don't have their own homes to secure, right? Being bombarded with, I want sandbags. I need sandbags. Or the gas station is overwhelmed with people lining up to get gas, right? I don't know what you're rushing to get gas for, because if a storm like that hits, where you going after the storm?
It's the culture of Trinidad and Trinidadians and Tobagonians to act that way. But my...
No, wait, don't knock the Tobagonians. Tobagonians are more prepared and more acute to storms and stuff, because they get hit. They get hit. When you look at the storms coming from the east, apparently they like warm water. So when they're approaching, there's this big South American mainland, which we are very much so next to. So it starts to divert to keep itself in the warm water, right? And ends up most time passing between Grenada and Tobago, right? But we get hit with feeder bands. Feeder bands bring a lot of wind and a lot of rain still. So even though you feel, hey, God is a Trinity and we would be spared.
Sorry, say that again,
right?
feeder bands? What is that?
Yeah. The storm has a center, eye, and you see the pictures with it looks like a swirl. So the feeder bands are in the swirl, and they have a lot of rain and wind with it. It's not a direct hit, but you get a lot of, picture the rain that you were seeing this morning. Picture it a lot more intense with a lot more rain.
So my question,
right?
go ahead.
Say again?
No, go ahead.
It could bring a lot of wind and rain, and it could bring sustained wind and rain for a period of time, for a few hours well, right? That represents for us persons who live in flood-prone areas, right? The South Basin, the Caroni Basin, or people who live in hilly areas could be prone to landslides, right? So people in the flood-prone areas could be flooded out, right? And what people don't understand is that you have to be prepared. 2 hours before a storm and you're not preparing, you're not prepared.
So what is the role of the ODPM when we're not at risk of disaster?
To educate. We have been educating people. We do outreaches. We have outreach officers. We go around, we implement. There's a lot of policies we put in place. So we have been placing what is called early warning systems. Right? They are placed around rivers when rivers reach their breaking point, right? And it sends out a warning. It gives off an alarm for the community to know, right? We've tested it in places on the east, like what's the name of that community? Kernaham community and a few other communities around, and we have tested it. We go to schools, we go to primary, secondary, and tertiary level schools. Right, and we continue. You'd hear ads on the radio. You would see ads on television that tell people to get ready. That tell people about having their grab-and-go bags. Tell people about waterproofing their important documents. About having enough water in your house. If you have to evacuate your area, where's your shelter? A lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago don't know where their shelter is.
So,
but sometimes it's on the next street.
But would not be the rule, like a direct consequence of them not knowing what the ODPM's job is? Because Minister Barry Padarath one thing he would have said was, coming on to the end of his statement, he said, we are far from being prepared. So I know that there's this commentary going around that maybe he doesn't understand the role of the ODPM, but maybe he does understand it, but it's just a misalignment of expectations.
I wouldn't comment on what the minister has to say. I'm not going to venture into any form of political banter or talk, but I would tell you that disaster preparedness begins with me. It begins with you.
Okay.
Right? And that's why we educating people to get ready. Right? Secure, clean the areas in and around your home. If everybody in a community would clean that drain in front and behind their house, if everybody in a community would pick up all the loose madness they have in the yard, trim the trees. You have some trees that are nice and big trees, but they're old. Trim the trees so they don't become something that traps wind, right? And throw down the tree either on your house or your neighbor's house. Trim the trees. Get yourself ready, right? Get things ready. Especially if you know you live in an area that likes to flood quickly, right? So disaster preparedness begins with me, right? Okay. So this sit back and wait. Now, local government, the DMUs and local government agencies, they're clearing rivers, right? Works clears major rivers, right? You see them dredging. I live south, and you're driving north-south, the main rivers, you see them dredging and clearing, etc. Yeah. You know, people still dumping nonsense in rivers.
Yeah.
When local government clears, is all kind of bed frame, washing machine, car engine. Yeah. People just dumping in and regular garbage. And you live in an area where garbage trucks pass, where you could call the local government, right? The regional corporation, right? If you have bulk waste, and they'd send a truck to pick it up. So we busy clearing and cleaning rivers so that rivers will have a free reign. And you're dumping in the river.
So would you say it's not an issue of education, but personal responsibility? Would you say that's like...
It's an issue of discipline. It's an issue of pride for country, right? And it's an issue of preserving for yourself, right? We also have instances where the same local government clearing drains, and because our water course passing through somebody's private land, they're not allowing them access. They don't want them have access. They don't want them to come on their land. So water does what? As free rain and it reaches an obstacle, it starts to pool. Starts to back up. It starts to overflow its banks, and it will continue doing that until it finds its way to the sea. It's always water flowing towards the sea. Right? Now, if there's high tide out at sea, and it's been raining for 2 days, the water goes nowhere till that tide drops in. Wow. It will flow into the rivers and it will back up. Because high tide is a surge that also pushes back onto the mouths of rivers, right? And here you have a river trying to get into the sea, right? So it's a keep back. It's a nature's keep back. It's a natural keep back until the tide drops a few hours away, and it will start to flow out from the closest point to shore, then to the farthest point inland.
How would you describe our national state of readiness going into this hurricane season? And, are there specific areas in the country that you would consider more vulnerable,
a higher
risk than others, or even underprepared than others?
Well, the agencies are ready, right? So other than coordinating, the ODPM also has warehousing, right? So during the non-disaster months, right, we help ensure that the regional co-op storerooms, storehouses are also filled, right? Whether it's mattresses, whether it's chainsaws, whether it's daily supply. We have like supplies that your whole house flooded out, so you need little toiletries, you need little, these little handy supplies to keep yourself clean and tidy, etc. Right, so we have those. We have a warehouse for that. So if at any time a regional co-op say, hey, ODPM, We're dealing with a situation here, right, which we'd be aware of, but we need some more mattresses, we need some tarpaulins, we need a couple more sores, then yeah, we could do that. They also have the luxury or the ability to call their neighboring regional corporation, right, who also has stock and say, hey, we need a hand, right, and they would lend a hand, right? So the agencies basically are ready. What we need for people to be is ready. Now, here's the next problem we have. Hey, John Brown community, you all need to evacuate here and come to the shelter. What do Trini say? I am not leaving my house. Right? If you're like crazy for people to come and thief, nobody can come and thief in nobody thieving anything in your house if it has 6 feet of water. So after the storm passes now, right, and we have resources to try and help, remembering that in those communities are some of the rescuers who are also stranded. Right? So sometimes it takes a little while, but we have to now come in, we have to send extra people, we have to send up drones to see all who sitting on the roof of their house or standing on the roof of their car, right, to now pull resources to come and rescue you when you could have been in the shelter that was mandated. So we'll mandate a shelter that, of course, wouldn't get flooded out, right? The local government is in charge of those shelters, right? So they know what they're doing. And you refuse to, so we have to now come and rescue you. So we have to get Coast Guard to come with the smaller boats to come in here, fire to come with their smaller boats to come in to rescue you, to make, because preservation of human life is paramount, right? Is ultimate. So we have to make sure that you are safe. When water subsides, only when water subsides is when we can now go in and begin recovery and rebuilding works. And that takes longer than the storm takes to pass.
I don't know if you can well answer this, but if you can, you know, do you think that the ODPM is adequately resourced, you know, financially or even with internal personnel in order to take out its proper mandates?
That's my next question. How many people do work at the ODPM right now?
We could do it a lot more. We could do it more staff. Every regional corp could tell you we could do it more equipment, right? Because sometimes you're handling multiple incidents in one region, right? Landslides bring fallen poles, fallen trees, right? Obstructions. Thank God we've never had people trapped in vehicles in a landslide or underneath a landslide. But everybody could do it. More resources, more equipment, right? The ODPM staff is not as high as it should be. We have about 25 to 30 people working here, and we have positions for about 45 people. So, and the people that are here work. When we are short of people, we have very capable and competent volunteers. I mean, real volunteers. They don't get paid. They have a day job, and they volunteer their time.
And I know about that, yes.
Right, and those are the same people that would have volunteered their time to go and assist with the oil spill in Tobago. All I had to do was write letters to their bosses to authenticate their requests for time, and surprising, they were given time. So there are a lot of people that understand. There are a lot of people that knows what's going on. People in the corporate world, right, willing to help. People come forward and donate water and all these sorts of things to persons in distress. Red Cross plays an active role. We play an active role. So it's a combined effort. When it reaches to the level where we get involved, it's a combined effort, right? And it has to be a combined effort. We are too small to work in silos.
Do you think,
right, as a country.
Do you think there's any merits or any way in which the ODPM can improve in its operations, separate and apart from funding and excess staff? Is there any way that we can take accountability in any way?
Yeah, because I was actually like literally going to ask, you know, without being too biased, Is there any room in the ODPM where you think y'all could do better, or in terms of, carrying out these mandates and educating the public, communities, getting different communities prepared for these disasters? And, there was a word I was thinking, being proactive instead of reactive.
Right. So we during the dry season, as we call it, we take the proactive role, and yes, the improvements can be made. Remember, we are speaking to a cross section of society that is urban, rural, and I will call deep rural.
Yeah.
Right. So communicating, right, can be a challenge when you get to far rural and deep rural areas, right? Some areas the radio is king, right? Some areas the social media, you're not getting connectivity until you come out from in that area, right? So yes, there are means, there are methods, and that's why we go. We go to schools, we go to communities, we go to companies, right? And we keep educating. The good thing about schools is that we'll always have a cadre of people to educate, because schools have a turnover, schools have a rollover, right? So we have to keep doing schools, we have to keep going to primary, secondary, we even go to preschools, we have to keep going to companies, right? So some companies, we do drills with them, we do evacuation drills, what to do, what to look for, right? So it's not just storms, it's earthquakes, it's tsunamis, right? We also have possible man-made disasters. We live in an industrial country, right? We also, people forget, we have mud volcanoes, right? That could decide, hey, I fed up, lie down here, I just going to erupt today.
I know that the ODPM does the work. I see the output, but when it comes to successes or efficiency, do you think that you've successfully hit that mandate of efficiency?
I think we hit it somewhat. Of course, there's room for improvement. And again, the efficiency or the effectiveness, right, would come from when everybody in society knows what to do and plays their role. Because people know, playing your role is something different. And I'll give you an example. People who live along the Mississippi River, when they get that warning, storm is coming, you know what they all do? They all get together, they all sandbag their houses, they all put their stuff in place, they make sure the drains are cleared, and they prepare themselves to evacuate, because you would have seen images of what happens when the Mississippi River misbehaves. And they don't need no big set of pressing, right? It comes out in the news, they know what to do, and that's where we want Trinbagonians to reach. Right? Hey, it's come out, we need to not go and buy rum, or we need to buy plywood, we need to put it up, or why not just have plywood, right? Stored, right? Storm coming, all right, let's put up this, let's get it ready, right? Let's make sure everybody in place. And when you pack a grab and go bag, don't try to pack the house into the grab and go bag. Because you have to be able to carry it.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be able to pick up the grab and go bag. And so if you pack a grab and go bag for your 10-year-old, it cannot overwhelm the child. Or if you pack a grab and go for granny, it cannot be too heavy for granny to lift. Right? Knowing you have wheelchair-bound persons in the house, we keep telling people that. Or you have bedridden people. You can do several things. One, you could inform the regional corporation, because they're keeping a database now of who lives where with wheelchairs, etc., to help, right? Inform them, not 2 hours before the storm, that's not going to help, right? Inform them, hey, I have somebody wheelchair bound. Do you know how you get in that wheelchair bound person and the rest of your family out of the house? Does the entire family know the plan for evacuation, where to go? For instance, you working in Port of Spain.
Sorry to harp on this too much, but can the ODPM afford to take more of, say an aggressive approach, like say scare tactics? Because we already know the culture of Trinidadians, so very lackadaisical.
And And also, I honestly believe that Trinidadians, we tend to forget that we live on an island. We don't have like that island living mindset.
We really don't.
Because, and I don't know if it's because people live too far away from beaches or what, or not everywhere in the country you can see water. But do you think if the ODPM kind of changes its approach to the public in that it's as a constant reminder that, hey, we are a small dot on a map. We are surrounded by a lot of water, you know, and just constantly remind people that this is an island. Water can come from all sides.
Right. Well, I wouldn't go as far as using scare tactics, but we would use education, knowledge. We show people videos. In order to be that more aggressive, yeah, we'll need more finances to be that aggressive, because it takes some doing.
What would aggression look like?
Aggression would be during the dry season months. We actually get to go more places and do more, right? We're already doing that, right? But aggression would look like also what we will try and do is also team up with other agencies. So we have a month. The month of May is National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Month. There's a multi-sectoral committee that sits there. It's not a sectoral. And, we move around and we educate. We had an opening for the first time in Battlegrounds Penal. The Penal Debe Regional Corporation was very attaining and fulfilling in us pulling that off, right? So normally we'll go on a promenade for the Spain, San Fernando, but we went into a community because we need to get more into the communities, right, in terms of education. So we had people like Red Cross with us, Met Office, same regional corporation. There was a youth organization, of course, ODPM was present, and they all provided education and interesting stuff for people to do. But what we need for people to do is practice what you're taught. Get yourselves ready, right? Now there's a reluctantness to get ready, because getting ready to evacuate means that this is a reality. Right? This is really happening. And we need to now, because we have never been hit so hard on a national scale, people will be reluctant.
Yeah.
Right? We can't, there's a cultural change that we need to have.
You would have mentioned, you know, to be, when speaking about being more aggressive, you know, needing more finances. Where would the ODPM get its finances from?
Because it's like
well, we attached.
State funded, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we said we attached our ministry.
Right. Do y'all do any internal fundraisers or anything like that to raise funds? Because we would assume, I mean, the government is not investing enough into the ODPM, clearly. So would y'all take it upon yourselves, or can y'all take it upon yourselves to do any fundraising for any specific project?
Well, as you are aware, nationally, there are economic issues. So it's not like, hey, we've been neglected. Is how much we could give you is probably the case. We also rely on lots of donations and a lot of assistance. So we would have had the Chinese government, the American government, the Japanese government donating things, right? So the Chinese would have donated nice, what we call ribs, like dinghies, rigid hull inflatable boats, you know, equipment to help pumps and lights and tools, etc. So we get donations, right? And we farm out those donations to the 14 regional corporations, right? Or to the corporation that most needs it, right? So if you live if you have a corporation in a flood-prone area, right, you would prefer dinghies, etc., so your people could be mobile in times of a flood, right? If your community doesn't flood, doesn't have a history of flooding, well then we give different resources. There are things that happen and are happening. We probably don't advertise it. Hey, look, we get these donations, but we do send out the little press release, etc. Right? But our job is to make sure that everybody that is in the disaster prep business could do their job. Right? And they are doing their job. It's just that people don't understand that once a disaster hits, there's a period in time. So if a disaster hit today and your community has 4 to 6 feet of water in it, what can any agency do besides remove people from the area until water goes down? There's nothing that can be done until that water subsides. Absolutely nothing. We can't roll in equipment, right? You can't see where the roads are from where the road ends, right? So you'll be putting more people's lives in danger, right? We have to wait until that water goes down. Sometimes that's take 2-3 days, You realize that before that water subsides. And when the water subsides, then you could see what needs to be done.
Yeah. So we are going to start wrapping up shortly, but
yes.
I do want to ask this. So the ODPM has been around for a very long time, right? Can you speak on any specific or give us any examples of any internal improvements or structural changes that would have been made over the many years to strengthen the ODPM's operations?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we have so we have an operations unit. We have a unit that does relief. We have a warehousing unit. We have a communications unit, call it the Public Information Education and Outreach unit, and have also been doing internal training, right? Incident system commands, because we are coordinating agency. So all of our staff have been trained in incident systems. With initial disaster assessment. We have now GIS officers. We've just taken on 2 drones so that we could always send up drones after a storm to see where people are, to see what's happening, to look at how water is draining, where it's draining, to know, hey, with transport, in the future, you probably need to make here wider, here bigger, here deeper, because look, this is how the water flowing, etc. So we've had improvements. We have trained our volunteers as well, because we don't want people going out there who are not trained. We have introduced something called psychological first aid, right? It is for first aiders and first responders, and we've done quite some training with the Defense Force, police, fire, etc. But it's recognizing that some people after disaster, their entire mindset has changed. Imagine you talk to a man and he just staring at you. You're not answering, or you're talking to somebody and they're behaving erratic, right? We have to know how to treat and deal with that person. That's very real, very important. And it doesn't have to be a national disaster to see that kind of thing happening. That could happen regionally. The local government personnel have been trained, right? They have volunteers as well. So what we're doing is we're increasing this volunteer corps. We need more people, right, to start rescue work within the community, because it have people in the community trained, right? This July, August, we are going to introduce our ODPM youth volunteer. We're going to target all the uniform organizations, youth organizations throughout Trinidad and Tobago, right, to have them also trained, and if necessary, persons 18 and over in those youth organizations could help form part of response, right? So it's about getting people to cooperate. It's getting people out of the mindset, local government go do it, ODPM go do it, this one go do it. We all have to take a stance. We all have to come out. We all have to be part of what preparing, mitigating, and responding is to be like. Yeah, I remember I told you, disaster preparedness begins with me.
So I know you don't want to talk about politics. I wouldn't go into that, but I do have to ask. The ODPM falls under the Ministry of National Security, but there is a need for working relationship with the Ministry of Public Utilities.
Homeland
Security, yes.
Yeah.
My mistake. But you do need to have a working relationship with Public Utilities Ministry.
Yeah, Public Utilities, Works and Transport, Planning and Development.
Is it a good working relationship right now, given the comments that were made in the public sphere?
No, it's a good working relationship. Is a long-standing relationship as well, right? I don't think even the minister was trying to derail that relationship. I think he was making comments about his own experiences, right? So we had to look beyond just his base comment. I haven't seen anything that says, you know, this relationship is being derailed. I don't think that's the intent of anybody, right? Even from a ministerial level, I didn't get that at all. So that relationship, it has to continue.
Yes.
Right? On our NDPPM, there are representatives from TSTT, TNTech, WASA, etc. that when we were sending people to Grenada and Carriacou and stuff after after Beryl, right? We just made a call and they sent, TNTech sent people, WASA sent people, TSTT sent people, and we went across to help our neighbors, right? And that's what it calls for. And I think that I don't see that derailing or diminishing. It wouldn't make sense, right? And I don't get the sense that is the intent of the minister either.
Nice diplomatic answer. Thank you so much.
You took the high road.
Yeah.
So what, I think about as we wrap, you know, what message would you like to leave with the public as, you know, we have entered the hurricane season, and I know you would have spoken a lot about being prepared. Preparedness starts with me. So, but, you know, leave us with something nice to help us get into that mind frame.
I would tell people it's simple. Have a checklist. Right? Be prepared. It's better to be ready than to be sorry. Right? Ensure that your entire family knows what it takes to be prepared. Listen to weather updates, right? Make sure you have at least a 3-day supply of drinking water for each family member, right? Because even if you don't evacuate, you could be stuck in your house for a couple of days until this water goes down, right? Move your vehicles to higher ground. Move your livestock, if you're into farming, to higher ground. Don't leave your animals to drown. Don't forget your pets. People run out of a home and leave the dog chained to the tree next to the kennel, right? And forget the poor dog, and the dog can't go anywhere because animals will save themselves if they are free. Right? And the dog drowns. So be prepared. Make a list. Make sure the family knows what to do, how to Spain. You live San Fernando. Your children go to school. What is the plan? How do you, if they tell you go home, are you going home or are you going to Lyme? What is the plan? Your family needs to have a plan. And if each family has a plan, then we'll have a community that is ready. And if we have communities that are ready, we'll have a nation that is ready.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Commander Kirk, for joining us on the program this morning and giving us that insightful conversation.
Not a problem, my lady and lady.
Yes. So we do hope you enjoy the rest of the day and stay safe.
You stay warm and stay dry today.
We'll try our best.
Yeah.
It's still raining, unfortunately.
It's still raining. All right, so be careful out there. Just be prepared and be aware.
Thank you very much.
Right, have a good day.
You too.
Peace and love.
All right, so that was Lieutenant Commander Kirk from the ODPM. I enjoyed that conversation a lot. I think this is something, well, we've been working on getting this for quite some time, so we finally got the interview. And I hope our viewers, we understand properly now, you know, the role and function of the ODPM. And it's not just, we can't just say we're depending on the ODPM, it's about you as well. You have to be responsible and take your own accountability for getting yourself prepared. The ODPM is there for support, but you have to ensure that you put yourself, you and your family in a position to make it through whatever comes our way.
Well, something I like to say is that we live in a society. It's contributive effort. Everybody has to contribute. So remember, at the end of the day, you live in a society. You do something, John does something, Jane does something, everybody does something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that ends our show for today.
I got so our quote for today: "You are never too old to set another goal or to dream a new dream." This is a quote by C.S. Lewis, and I really like that quote because, you know, sometimes we feel, oh, we're too old. You know, my time has passed. If you're in your 60s, your 70s, you're like, you know, I just have to live out the rest of my days. But it's never too late, and it's never too early to start dreaming or to set a goal for yourself or to accomplish something. You know, do it. You can be in your well past your 40s, you know, past your midlife crisis, and you're just thinking, what now? Come up with something, you know. And
something I like to see is like older people in school, older people. It's never too late to do something you've always dreamed of doing. If you want to be a doctor and you're 70, you could go ahead and be a doctor. You just probably might be the oldest doctor there, but
and that's
you'll be a doctor.
As long as you wake up and you take a breath, you open your eyes and you take that breath in the morning, anything is possible.
And on that, something that just came to my mind, and I thank God for this. You deserve to feel proud of yourself. When you wake up and you draw that first breath, you deserve to feel proud of yourself. So go out there and do something that makes you feel proud of yourself today.
Yes. Yeah. So guys, as always,
you can always engage with us on WESN CC, WESN TV on Facebook, or you can WhatsApp us on the number you see on your screen, 682-9376, 682-9376. Head to our comments, our DMs. Tell us what you want to hear. We love to hear from you. We love to hear your points of view, discussion points. Let us know. We're all ears.
Yep. So stay safe, stay inspired, stay informed, and don't go too far. We have Sean Michael Small coming up with Talking Point on the hour of 8 o'clock. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
My name is Dr. Joanne Williams-Carroll, and I am the Director of Behavioral and Mental Health at the Community Hospital. At the Community Hospital, we believe in nurturing mind, body, and soul. Through our counseling and chaplaincy program, we will provide you with support and strength you need to help with your mental and emotional well-being. Give us a call.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also
A lot of the patients who present to us with infection in their feet, the infection would have started several days before. Now, the interesting thing is, neuropathy usually goes hand in hand with peripheral arterial disease. So these patients lose the sensation to feel. Now, they may have the ability to have crude touch or general sensation, but that fine sensation, for instance, when a needle sticks them or a thumbtack sticks them, they would lose that sensation.
Correct.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today. SM Group International Limited, your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
WESN.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Motorcyclist dies in crash on Archibald de Leon Highway. Young defense handling of Nikon explosion report. Scoreboard glitch. Poor seating mar World Cup qualifier. Angostura scaled back support for a concert headlined by Vibes Cartel. And internationally, curfew and internet blackouts in Manipur after protests erupt. Now for the details. A 34-year-old mechanic from La Romaine is dead following a motorcycle crash in Point Fortin on Saturday night. Kenzie Blondell was riding along the Archibald de Leon Highway around 7:30 p.m. when he lost control of his blue Suzuki 600 near the Vance River overpass and slammed into concrete barriers. A fellow rider told police Blondell had attempted to merge in front of a silver Honda Civic. He was taken to the Point Fortin hospital but died about an hour later. Investigations are ongoing. Former Energy Minister Stuart Young is standing by the ministry's decision not to release a report into a deadly explosion at the Nikon energy plant last year. In a social media statement, Young said the ministry acted on legal advice and could not release the report without consent from Nikon, which had not agreed. However, the High Court ruled last week that the ministry's refusal to share the report with the victim's widow was unlawful. Alan Lane Ramkasoon, a pipe fitter with Massey Energy, died days after sustaining severe burns in the June 2023 blast. Young said current Minister Dr. Rudal Munilal's criticism were unfair. A malfunctioning scoreboard and chaotic seating arrangements frustrated fans at Thursday's World Cup qualifier between Trinidad and Tobago and St. Kitts and Nevis. The sport company of Trinidad and Tobago said the scoreboard was functioning during testing but failed shortly before the match began. Meanwhile, spectators complained about disorganized seating in the covered section of the Hazley Crawford Stadium, with many forced to stand or sit in aisles despite having valid tickets. No timeline has been given to fix the scoreboard issue. Angostura Holdings initially approved a TT $6 million sponsorship for the now controversial One Caribbean Music Festival, but later scaled it down to $400,000 TT. Internal documents show the company had concerns over visibility as a title sponsor and potential risks, including immigration issues with Cartel, financial losses, and venue availability. Cartel did not perform at the May 31st event due to a payment dispute. Angostura later distanced itself from the concert, saying it was only a brand sponsor, not involved in its management. Internationally, tensions are rising again in India's northeastern state of Manipur following the arrest of 5 leaders from the mighty group Arambai Tengal. Violent protests erupted in Imphal after their detention, prompting authorities to impose an indefinite curfew and suspend internet services in 5 districts. A 13-year-old boy was injured during clashes with police. The group's leader was arrested for alleged involvement in 2023 ethnic violence. The Congress Party has slammed Prime Minister Narendra Modi for failing to restore peace, accusing him of neglecting the region. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi Macnish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Apologies for not being in the studio. Sure, Michael Smollett, this is Talking Point. As one of our viewers pointed out, the format of the show had no formal introduction and greetings. So, of course, I bid you greetings. Good morning to those watching live, and good evening to those who would be watching the replay later tonight. Now, there are a couple of things before we get to the daily review that I want to touch on a bit more informally. One of them being an update of the main thing that I spoke about yesterday. It's still, I guess you could say, the top story, and to some extent I understand it, but it's still slightly frustrating because it speaks to how I believe we view politics, news, policy, and the division, dare I say, of our perspectives. Sometimes it's about political parties, other times it's about what we think should be done. And not always does it allow for the minutiae analysis. Not always does it allow someone to say, in this situation, I like this part, but not that part. All too often, and this could be because of a byproduct of the media news cycle, it's what is the basic premise, what is the oversimplified message, which will then essentially commit you down to one path, put you on an absolutist position. You don't get a lot of detail. You don't get a lot of room to maneuver. And it dumbs down the conversation. And quite frankly, it causes us far more grief than we realize, because it ends up leaving the population who are looking to others to inform them, because for various reasons, they don't have the time or inclination to look into certain matters in details themselves. And that's not about intelligence. That is literally about how you prioritize your time, how you prioritize your day. And there's no wrong decision in that. It's an unfortunate reality of life, because if you think the old time days were better, there was a time in human history where most people had to work from sunup till sundown. It was what it was. There weren't that many wealthy people at that point in time. I'm not talking about the Renaissance or medieval times. I'm talking about even before that. I mean, humanity has had its ebbs and flows. And now the question is, at this point in time, is it an ebb or flow? But enough about all that preamble to the preamble. The situation with Venezuela is, of course, back in the news. There are reports that our government has engaged with the Venezuelan government. However, I want to start off with what made at least one morning headline. The headline is just simply, it's crazy. And it's a quote or a paraphrase of the Minister of Interior, Justice and Peace. Don't ask me to pronounce his name. I don't want to butcher it. But the quote in the report is, that woman's statements are crazy because we're not entering Trinidad, nor are our boats entering Trinidad. I don't know what lethal force they have, but it's crazy, a crazy statement. Now, what we have, that's not a reason to attack the person reporting the news, it's a reason to investigate. To some extent, I think part of the reason why I brought up that whole thing about the details, the minutiae, I'm not entirely sure, did the state of Venezuela engage with the state of Trinidad and Tobago with regards to, we have issues, we would like to investigate it? Because one of the issues are, as was reported on his show, so first of all, is he speaking as a minister or as a show host? I'm not entirely sure. Unless I'm wrong that it was his show, right? But it was the same minister that made the initial claims. One of our nationals in an international terror plot that included not just Americans and Colombians, which politically is understandable, but also Ukrainians, apparently, allegedly, somehow. And this plot was launched or was facilitated by routes that run through Trinidad and Tobago. So it, to some extent, included us. Although I do question once again if they intended. Usually when you use the subtleties of language that was done in the report that was put out in the public without any corroborating evidence, And even then, the evidence, you know, to what extent do you believe the evidence? But that's a whole other kettle of fish. Usually, it's a subtle dig internationally. And that's why I said, what they're saying sets us up to then be labeled as a nation of terrorists. We could be collateral damage for the Essequibo situation or their American sanction situation. Or maybe they just thought Trinidad and Tobago was a convenient location where it's one thing to say it about Colombia, it's another thing to say about Guyana. But if you say it about Trinidad and Tobago, maybe we'll get away with it because we know they can't control the borders. So we could probably say anything and it most likely will be difficult to disprove. That could be it. We could just be the patsies in this situation because we're incapable of giving any guarantees that a situation did not occur, so they can kind of get away with saying whatever they want with regards to stuff coming across the border from Trinidad and Tobago. Because I do still think, and I don't have a lot of good reason to think this, they weren't necessarily prepared for us to respond at all. That's what I believe. We were the target of this. But I think, ironically, I'm going to say this about them, and you might think I'm a little too bold-faced to say this as well as what I said yesterday. But I do think that Venezuela was a little bit politically naive when they mentioned us in this whole thing, even if we were secondary, and not expect us to respond. Now, I'll say this. He's technically not wrong. Similar to how I believe the Prime Minister was not wrong to basically be decisive in her statements. The fact that she said that we'll use deadly force, that was a little bit overboard because the practicality of the situation, anybody with a basic level of understanding of military equipment, you don't need tactics. We're so low level, just the basic premise that they have a bigger gun on their boat and it's going to outrange us and outgun us is all that we need to know in this situation, right? Basically speaking, we're not equipped for that fight. It's not to say that we will necessarily automatically lose it, but we're not well known for our maritime tactical brilliance. Let's put it that way. We can't even catch drug smugglers in pirogues because we choose not to. You mean tell me you're going to defend the nation from a hostile aquatic force, marine force? Probably not happening, right? That's not reasonable. So in similar cases where I'm like, maybe the Prime Minister should not have threatened the use of deadly force, you could have still have a strongly worded message. You could have still written a strongly worded letter. You could have still made a decisive statement to reiterate your position, or sorry, not to reiterate, to iterate your position, to make your position in no uncertain terms. We're not going to tolerate this. We're heading it off at the pass. We're nipping it in the bud. We're preempting anything. We don't have to wait for something to happen. Sometimes, too many times, politicians like to wait for things to happen. I have no issues taking things up front. But when he did say, I don't know what lethal force they have, I have to agree with him there. But again, the problem is he's saying, let's cooperate, let's investigate. Well, what if you wanted to cooperate, what you would do? Because think about it. The analysts are complaining, why didn't we use diplomatic channels first? Why did the Prime Minister make a statement out to the public like that at its scenario? Well, isn't that what he did? I'm not saying that the Prime Minister is 100% right. I'm just saying, you know, why are we literally complaining about what the Prime Minister did wrong when the Venezuelan minister did the same wrong? Two wrongs don't make a right. It's not as though because he did it, the Prime Minister now is automatically right in everything she says, any matter she could do no wrong. No. We could still criticize the fact that it's an empty threat. And the gun talk is not necessarily of any practical value. But Venezuela basically just threw an accusation out there, didn't engage with us first. And again, I don't understand what is it about Western academics, commentators, scholars, analysts, media personalities, and politicians that have these self-imposed rules for themselves. Now, I know for opposition politics, of course you're going to not worry. You're going to use what is the most convenient stance for you. That's kind of to be expected. Can't to some extent, you can't fault the PNM for that, right? Although it's a little bit disappointing because it's basic, but it is what it is because the UNC did it as well, and never forget that. But maybe more on that as time goes on, right? This doesn't feel quite the same, and I've already spoken about that before. But what is it about we're going to put these standards on our own Western governments, but we'll never put it on non-Western governments? I don't understand. It's almost like we have lower expectations for them. There's a lower threshold of reasonableness. They don't need to do as much to be reasonable. We need to do more. Now, granted, I understand that thinking to some extent. We should be better. If we claim we're better, we should be better. But at some point, it comes to basic, where are we really going to have such a low threshold for them? And some people might say, well, no, it's about the fact that they're a bigger threat than us, so we have to eat crow. That's not how it works. Unless we want to have our destiny dictated by. And it's not as though they have the means to exercise direct power and control. And it's not like all married to Dragonfield going through that we have no choice. But it seems as though the Prime Minister has reported that we have engaged diplomatically with Venezuela. The relationship is stable. Has apparently engaged with his counterparts in Venezuela, our ambassador in Caracas, or our embassy, their foreign channels, etc., etc. The one last thing about this, and again, just because you agree with one aspect of the issue doesn't mean you have to agree with all aspects of the issue. The one thing that I do want to point out, the Prime Minister spoke to the fact that former Foreign Affairs Minister Emery Brown offered his services in handling the diplomatic fallout with Venezuela. Now, here's the thing. In general, I understand why the Prime Minister said what she said. Or I understand the stance on this that the Prime Minister took. Because it seems as though, first of all, Minister Brown, it's difficult to take you as an objective, neutral person because you already had a stance that condemned the Prime Minister moving forward. And it's not as though he used the most diplomatic language in that. He didn't use incendiary language, if my memory is correct, but he didn't use the most diplomatic language in terms of that. So he's operating in the premise that there is a diplomatic fallout because of the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister is completely in the wrong. And I don't think he necessarily spoke to the actual issue at hand that the Prime Minister was addressing. It may seem like most people are speaking to that issue, but what they're really speaking to is the issue of her choice in language, which is not technically or exactly the same thing. So given that's his stance, I can understand that the Prime Minister doesn't want to entertain his help because his help is basically say, you're wrong, let me fix it. And that's not helping. And a lot of times in our lives, people will try to do that. That's not helping. You're not trying to help me, right? You're trying to one-up me. That's what it could be interpreted as. That's not the stance of someone looking to help. But here's the key thing, because it's not as though he went out of his way necessarily to vilify her either. But I could understand why the government doesn't want to go down that path. He's an opposition. Is he an opposition senator? But he's a minister of the former cabinet as well. It's also kind of too soon. And this is, again, something that the PNM seemingly does not seem to understand. You're lost. It's too soon to take you all seriously anymore. If you all were that good, you all wouldn't have lost by such a big margin. If you lost by a little bit, that might be different. Let's not forget Kamala never lost by a lot. She lost twice, but she never lost by that much. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. How the Prime Minister communicated her rejection of Dr. Emery Brown was a mistake. Because she did it in a combative way. Now, it might not have been the most incendiary way, or you might interpret it as an incendiary way. She pointed out maybe Amory can instead reach out to the government to give advice on who were the PNM ministers that participated in the kidnapping of Brent Thomas from Barbados. And now, to some extent, it's a fair statement to make, but in the context of this situation, I think it's too combative. And then it takes everything she says about being open to anybody serving, to try to find the best people, or anything that alluded to the fact that it's not going to be the usual political our side time, so your side now is out of time and loses. Anything with regards to crossing the divide, anything with regards to coming together, it undermines that. To what extent it does, that could be subjective. We could debate that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't help with that. And this was a lost opportunity, ironically, to one-up Dr. Amory Brown, to show him, listen, what you were doing and your approach was not necessarily the best way to be constructive. And given our stances, we don't think it's in the best interest of the nation to have you represent the state, given the difference in approaches or policy decisions or what have you. But we will maybe consider your request. Something like that. Something... It seems as though we really can't get beyond aggressive gun talk in our internal politics. So that gives it another layer of irony that other politicians are criticizing the Prime Minister that is routinely made. And it's almost like if it's fine, you know? We could bad talk each other people and say all kind of incendiary nonsense. But somehow it's viewed differently when we do it to each other. But if we do it to a foreign power that is technically and technically is of questionable legitimacy, not just based on the politician that some people like in the White House currently, but technically based on the previous administration. So it doesn't matter what your political ideology is. No, that's a bridge too far. Prime Minister is not blameless. The Prime Minister pivoted in the situation, but we want to have a zero-sum game, and we want to boil it down, and we want to oversimplify it, and then say, oh, but it's a complicated issue. But you're not treating it like if it's a complicated issue. You're not communicating like if it's a complicated issue. And to be fair, the Prime Minister potentially is not either, and is too emotional about it with regards to how it's affecting the internal politics now. So we have to wait and see if the current administration will potentially come back to the median, come back to the norms, which would be disappointing given how they started. And we also have to wait and see how this whole situation turns out. What I suspect will happen is it will eventually boil down to nothing. And then, of course, it will be subjective on whether that's because of how the Prime Minister handled it or because it was never a big deal to begin with. We won't necessarily ever truly know unless we get some actual indicators from Caracas, from the Maduro regime itself. We have a comment. Let's take this comment here as we're on the topic. Again, so how come Guyana restraining Venezuela? Is their army any more well-equipped? No. If they went to America, would probably lose to Venezuela just because of size. I think our population is bigger than Guyana's. They don't have... It's literally the most basic of military equations. Venezuela is just a bigger nation. So not only will it have, generally speaking, more resources, they have oil too, even with all the sanctions, right? They have tens of millions of people. We have 1.5. Guyana is in the high hundreds of thousands. They're not going to win. One of the things that's restraining Venezuela is America. One of the other things that might be restraining Venezuela is Europe, and specifically the United Kingdom, because we're Commonwealth nations, right? Now, will the UK come to our defense? It's not as simple for them because America has more of a commitment and is geographically closer, and that matters with regards to deployment of naval assets and troops and how much expense and time it will take logistically to stage everything towards TNT and Guyana, right? And we just had, we signed or re-signed SOFA, reaffirmed certain agreements, signed new agreements with America with regard, and we just had the trade winds. The kingdom can't project power when it wants to. It could be that it might take them longer, but given the fact that they have one of the largest carriers outside the American class or Nimitz class, they have a navy that has the capacity, and they proved that in the Falklands campaign, to project power, right? And it might be enough power. It might not take that much for the Americans and the British to significantly impact Guyana's ability to wage war. And you don't, not Guyana, Venezuela. And you don't need to conquer Venezuela. You just need to prevent Venezuela from succeeding in their adventurism, right? Which is very well within reach. And I think Venezuela knows this, so they have to be careful. They could potentially, because they're right here and could immediately get some quick wins if they wanted to, invade Guyana. But Saddam Hussein took Kuwait, right? And then it just took time, because that was the 5th largest army in the world in 91, to build up enough of a force to deal with him. It won't take that much time to build up a force to deal with Guyana. You probably just need one American carrier strike group, one American Marine Expeditionary Force. So you're looking at about 10 ships, two battle groups, basically. One British group would just be icing on the cake. Europe itself also might be involved, because the economic interests of the oil and gas in Guyana long term, and the fact that the resources in Venezuela is basically blocked by sanctions. You don't want to risk that, right? So it's similar. It's not on the same level, nowhere near the same level, but it's kind of similar to, well, Saddam took Iraqi oil resources and kind of messed that up. Do you want to see what he could do with Kuwait? No. So that's the cynical thing. That's not even about the sovereignty of Kuwait. It's just, let's not give someone who can't manage critical strategic resources for the globe the capacity to take over someone else's resources, right? And then, to what extent is Venezuela truly equipped to undertake military operations of any sophistication? They might be able to defeat Guyana, but to say that they are probably going to be a well-trained, effective or efficient army, it's probably not going to be the case, because dictatorships have this near universal tendency to effectively eliminate the capacity for individual initiative. Because if you have a smart general that has an independent thought in his head, one day he might, overturn your regime. So the military is not so much of a tool to affect wars. The primary purpose of the Venezuelan military, the Chinese People's Liberation Army, the People's Liberation Army is the army technically of the Chinese Communist Party, not the People's Republic of China. Because their primary goal is to keep the political status quo. So actual effective leaders in military positions, that's not going to be a thing. To some extent, that's what happened to Russia in the opening Ukraine. It's just that our battlefield tends to be the most Darwinian existence of all time. Therefore, bad leaders, junior officers, generals, they were killed off rather quick. Anyway, that's a whole long segue. But one other thing to get into, a couple other things. One, or last thing, and we'll take a break. There was a female fetus found in Beetham landfill, and I'm not entirely sure what this all was about. There's a lot of questions of how did that get there. Now, I don't know if by fetus, if they know for sure this was a late-term abortion or if this was a newborn baby, right? Not entirely sure if they made that distinction, why they're classifying it as a fetus. I'm not going to go into all of it. Even if I had the time, I didn't want to, but I'm just going to say this. The issues on abortions that are politicized are based on arguments from the 80s, and we're in 2025. We're 40 years plus, maybe 41 years away from the landmark case, quote unquote, of Roe v. Wade. If anyone thinks medical science has not advanced and has changed the equation on what can or cannot happen with regards to pregnancies, then, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. That's, to some extent, how obsolete the arguments are. That's an oversimplification. So I don't know to what extent this is going to bring up questions about our laws on abortion and women's reproductive rights or whatever. All I'm just going to say is that if it does, just note, Roe v. Wade was 1984, I believe. We're in 2025. Things in medicine, that arguments in Roe v. Wade, I believe, obsolete. A premature baby that would have been an automatic death sentence back then has a reasonable chance of survival now, and that's just one aspect of it. Now, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to do the review, and then I'll have something more on the whole politics and media later on in the show. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN show. Michael Small. We're back. We'll be right back after this.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world. Diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private healthcare affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Review, Sean Michael Small here from the home. Didn't make it to the studio. My apologies. It's just one of those things. Prefer to be in the studio, but thankfully, with the miracles of modern technology, we could still have a show and not have it too late. Now, with that said, in today's day review, the first story I want to get to, not too much to comment on. I just have a question that came out of seeing the latest update with regards to the appeal over the default judgment in the lawsuits from the Vindra Naipaul Kuhlman case, where the 9 former suspects, I believe, took a lawsuit to the state. The state did not defend the suit. They got default judgment, each getting $2.1 million. So looking to get about $20 million in total payout. It made great headlines, and potentially it's one of those cases where the public headlines may have affected the High Court judge in the matter, because after ruling in the men's favor, she then overturned the default judgment, saying that the lawsuit was not properly served on the Attorney General's office. The problem is, basically, it came out after the fact, and I think in part due to the presentations of former Attorney General Reginald Moore in Parliament with regards to Stanley John's, his investigation over the missing file that disappeared. Ultimately speaking, I believe the Solicitor General had access to the file, first of all, apparently electronically, and that there was questions with regards to the response by the various relevant parties from the Office of the Attorney General. The appellants did what was required of them, and in some instances went beyond. This is the lawyers of the men. In some instances went beyond what was required in liaising with the attorneys at law from the Chief State Solicitor and Solicitor General's Department in bringing to their attention the progress of the case. In my judgment, the respondent did not act as soon as reasonably practicable after he found out that the judgment had been entered against him. The delay in this case has been unexplained, and all the while, the damages assessment proceeded with the full participation of the state. The appeal court was split in the ruling 2-1, but they basically awarded the $20 million payout or reinstated it. Now, essentially, the argument is that the situation was available. John's report, 81-page report, noted the missing file was always available in electronic form. After he was essentially chosen by then AG Reginald Moore to try to find it or find out what happened with it, right? The AG said that there was nothing criminal that happened, but the fact of the matter is, it seemed as though the whole situation, because it was available, now we have the questions as to exactly why did it happen, right? The explanation of what happened seemed to be very underwhelming. And so underwhelming to the point where it makes you wonder if something nefarious is going on, because essentially they had access to the file even when the physical file disappeared. And it seemed as though the relevant parties involved just didn't do their job. Didn't do their job that led to a $20 million payout by the state. I don't know what was the motivation of the lack of action. So now, and from someone who has heavily criticized Reginald Moore as Attorney General, I'm not gonna just now take the lazy way out and say, you see, he was so bad, and that explains it. No, that doesn't explain it at all. Just exactly why did this happen? Was it incompetence? Who was incompetent? Was it laziness? I really think, because I don't know if this is the usual corruption that we are accustomed to and we lament, but we do nothing about, and we just kind of let happen to us. And as Margaret Wade says, the female entrepreneur from Africa, we're probably over-regulated, and hence low-level corruption is just necessary for everyday business, whether personal or actual private enterprise. But no, I don't think this is that. I don't think this is even the political corruption that we're accustomed to. I have no idea what this is. But the breakdown, you see, that's the thing. It's not as though something happened and $1 billion was siphoned off, or something happened and there was another plot in all of this to murder somebody else. Or there was some frame up of a civil servant or public official or politician to ruin their political career. It just seemed as though nobody did anything over a major high-profile case, and we just lost $20 million by default. And it seems so simple. It seems so basic. And that's why it's so worrying. And that's why I can't necessarily just ascribe the usual suspicions, oh, well, you know, some political this or individual agenda that. Because there's nothing like who benefits from this, really. It's not as though Anand Ramlogan is a PNM lawyer. So his clients and he is beneficial to the then administration. Reginald Moore himself doesn't really stand to benefit from this. So I can't say he has some kind of agenda here. I can't say that for the Solicitor General or other parts of the Attorney General's office and ministry, legal affairs ministry. But you know, there's no smoking gun, there's no obvious thing, and this is so basic that because you have to ask the question, exactly what prevents something like this from happening again? Because this is the thing, it's like you're walking down a sidewalk and you just fall. There's nothing to slip on. There's no water. The ground isn't slippery. There's no ridge. There's no hole. There's no stick. There's no rope. There's no cable. There's no cord. There's no one sticking out the leg. You just fall. It's so basic, you know, you kind of have to look and say, you're just going to fall like that? Are you clumsy? Because if you're just clumsy, it could happen again. If you're just clumsy in how you handle state matters or careless, it could happen again. And that, to me, at this point, it's not even about the 20 million anymore because it seems like that's gone, right? If people don't like the fact that they're getting $2.1 million a piece, all we could do is suck it up and say too bad because it's out of our hands. So at this point, it's not about if this is correct or not, because the case never really saw trial. It was a default judgment. For all we know, on the merits of the case, they might have deserved no money or maybe even more money. We don't know. A judge never actually weighed in on the merits of this case. Think about that and then understand why I say the question is, can this happen again? Because $20 million is not necessarily going to, you know, rip out the heart of our national budget. But it's $20 million that's not going to be available to do something, like buy body cameras, or even buy the laptops, which I do think is not the most efficient use of money, but people like it, it is what it is. It's going to cause a program to be cut in the current situation that we find ourselves in financially. Think about that. If you have a request of the government, if you have a program that you think is worthy of government financing, and legitimately it's deserving of it because it's for the public good, etc., etc. If you have a proposal and the government says we don't have money for that, it could have been this 20 million. Let's move on to the next topic this morning. One of the things that I do find is a little bit, well, former Minister of Energy, former Prime Minister, former Minister of everything, Stuart Young, he has defended the decision of the ministry to not disclose the investigative report into the second, not even the first, the second industrial accident in Nikon that claimed the life of a third-party contractor. And it was had to take the court by the deceased widow. And I believe the court basically said, no, you are wrong. So Justice Quinlan Williams ruled the ministry had not presented sufficient evidence to justify its decision to deny her request. This is to say the spouse of the deceased in late 2023, right? Justice Quinlan Williams also found that there was significant public interest warranting disclosure, which, so those two things are not exactly the same, right? She also took issue with the ministry relying on Nikwan's position on the disclosure of another report on a separate non-fatal accident in 2021 for denying the request made by Ramki Sood. Undoubtedly, this is a far more serious incident and Nikwan should have addressed its mind to that. It appears to this court that the defendant's unwillingness to disclose the report arose through secrecy and reasons of self-preservation, especially in regards to the fact that the claimant is desirous of pursuing litigation. Because here's the thing, it's not as though, and this is what I don't understand, I'm kind of confused at this whole situation, because it's not as though the Ministry of Energy did not take a decisive stance against Nikon with regards to saying no more gas for you because you're not paying the bills, because upstream, downstream, the company created to facilitate the sale of gas to Nikon basically had to pay NGC, and NGC basically was saying, well, we ain't getting no money, you ain't getting no gas. So you could sue upstream, downstream all you want. That's who has a contract with you, right? Mr. Chief Visionary Officer. But the other thing is, the ministers, so I don't know why he's defending Nikon. I really don't. I don't know. Because like at that point, the government, it's not like it took long after the accident for them to say no more gas for you. So I don't see where the people involved in Nikon, was it the founder that they were trying to protect? Was it Nikon itself they were trying to protect? Was it the banks that invested in Nikon despite the fact that I didn't understand why they kept throwing good money after bad? But this is what Stuart Young said. What the newspaper reports, and of course Munilal failed to indicate, is that Nikon, an entity that would be affected by the release of the report, refused to consent to the report being released, and according, this could expose the Ministry of Energy and arguably its staff members to liability should the report have been released. Exactly. Now, was it slander? Was the report untrue? It's not the Ministry of Energy, the government, and does not the Ministry of Energy have to weigh its responsibilities to all stakeholders, including the people and the family members of the deceased? Munir believed that he could throw some shade, but it is not well-founded. In fact, unsurprisingly, it is misplaced as the matter was being properly handled for the Ministry of Energy by experienced senior counsel and state attorneys. Well, first of all, the judge says that's a load of crap. And maybe the judge is wrong. But I find that far too often there are too many things that so-called senior counsel, so-called legal experts, so-called state attorneys advise the government, and they end up losing the matter and or looking really bad publicly. And it makes me wonder if the so-called experienced senior counsels, either one, are bad at their jobs, or two, technically don't exist. Because how often are you going to repeat the same tactic of, well, we rely on these guys, or they got it wrong? That's okay. They're experienced senior counsels. We could rely on them always. But they're going to get it wrong too many times, one could argue. Or do they actually exist? At this point, I have to ask, how often are you going to take advice that turns out to be bad? I mean, let's not forget, before he was senior counsel, Faris Awari took a lot of advice from senior counsel. And he ended up having to be replaced because, well, he even tried to say that that there was no senior counsel at one point until a judge said, that's bad law. That's not good law. And then he said, no, well, yeah, I didn't write it. Actually, it was a senior counsel who wrote it. Reginald Moore, senior counsel, at the time of his appointment, deferred to advice of senior counsel. Lawyers could tell you, be careful, because if you do this, you might open yourself up to liability. Is it always automatic? And do they, at what point do, I get it, because look, even the American military has lawyers to basically say, we need to protect ourselves. But that's their point of view, that's their job. Their job is to say, be careful of this because you could open yourself to liability. It doesn't automatically mean that what they're telling you to be careful of, you should not do. That is automatically the wrong decision. A government is more than just needing to protect itself legally and in terms of liability. And to what extent did the Ministry of Energy have a duty of care to keep this secret because Nikon wanted it so, because Nikon was afraid of litigation? I don't understand. Who do you serve when you were in power? Did you serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago? Or did you serve business interests of private individuals? No, I'm not someone that is a supporter. You know, I don't agree with everything Dr. Ruel says. You know, I am not biased for the guy. But in this situation, when Stuart Young says he could throw some shade, but it's not well-founded, well, Justice Williams apparently says, nope, it is well-founded. So I have no idea what this whole defense was for, because at the end of the day, a guy died in a plant that had to reopen after having an industrial accident not too long after its first opening. A plant that essentially was a bad investment for the financiers, for the gas put into it that probably never will be paid back to the NGC, and to the fact that while that was going on, other plants that needed supplies of natural gas had to close down or reduce its operations. We already had a shortage then when this plant opened. And if you want to say that the stewardship of the Ministry of Energy was so great under the PNM administration, this is one of the main exhibits of why that is not so. But I gave you kudos when, by this second situation, accident, the government was decided to say, we're not about to throw good money after bad. The banks, y'all could do it if y'all want. We ain't gonna be suckers no more. But now you're still defending the situation that you technically abandoned. I do not understand. Politically, what are you thinking? Because it seems as though you yourself don't know what you're doing in this situation. Because the lack of consistency for someone who's supposed to be so intelligent, who at one point in time proved on the national stage that he was intelligent, but this is probably an extension of your campaign where your intelligence left your every time they played that stupid jingle. More and more brain cells were lost, I guess, with the election jingles. Because I have never seen someone's public persona go from so promising to so disappointing, so abruptly as with Stuart Young. The family is still hoping for more information with regards to that situation. So we need to understand that while, and I myself might be at fault just now of doing this, politicizing the issue, a man died over this. And this is what he thinks, similar to Paria. You're not gonna eliminate the possibility of industrial accidents, but you have to try to do your best to lower it as much as possible. And the fact that we're playing games over this means that the priority is not the safety and welfare of workers to ensure that they know they have the support of the entities under which they work under. Therefore, they can commit themselves to their job because we always have their back. Their companies, their employers, the contract holders, and the state and the people always have their back. They're supported. We run the risk that that's not going to be the case. And it's potentially going to make things more expensive for us because we're too lazy to take things up front. All right. Let's go to the last story before we go to the video. I know I'm tight on time, but the opposition leader is trying to rebuild the party. It seems as though she's on an uphill battle. Now, the battle is uphill because of the hole that the PNM dug itself in, given the last 2 years of how it ran the country. More importantly, not just how it ran the country, but how it communicated its policies, its decisions, its methods of running the country. And then the cherry on top was, I won't say it's the worst political campaign I've ever seen locally, because the vote Kamala in the partnerships re-election campaign might have been the most obvious poor choice of political strategy. But the execution of this election campaign might be the worst. It might be the worst. And It's not even that. So there is how the country was governed, how that was communicated, how the election campaign was handled, and then after the probably historic defeat, how the party is handling that defeat. All of these things are contributing to the opposition leader having to have an uphill battle of rehabilitating the party. So she's quoted as saying, we didn't lose our way, we just lost touch. I'm not too sure if I agree with that. I feel as though you're trying to not necessarily go all the way with admitting how bad it is. Maybe you don't see it as badly as I see it, and that's fair. Either way, at least from the opposition leader, there is acknowledgement. And for the most part, I don't have issues with how she communicates. People like, we need more bluster and more charisma, and now is not the time for that. When someone is guilty of something, you want to see them be all charismatic and lovable and fiery. What do you think happened after Will Smith slapped Chris Rock? He had to kind of go away. Because as rightfully so, Dave Chappelle said, if it was him that got slapped, he wouldn't have been able to enjoy the rest of his night and have his Grammy Oscar acceptance speech. But you know, to be fair, the Oscars needed some time to figure out what they were going to do. But he himself understood at the very least, he can't just be Big Willie, you know, cool Will Smith, the Fresh Prince, the very next day. He knew that was done. He needed to rehabilitate himself so that we could accept him again. Because the persona that he crafted for himself was destroyed by his own actions. No offense, PNM, but your persona was destroyed by the actions of your own cabinet members. The opposition leader is saying that they have to acknowledge one's mistakes, accept responsibility of their actions, right? The quote, another quote, as a party we must be honest enough to face the truth. We must be brave enough to say we did not always get it right. Why is that so hard? Because the results at the end of the day are what they are. There's no hiding this anymore. Unless it is a lot of people are playing a lot of internal political games. I know there are a lot of supporters that don't want to admit how bad it is, but what I'm speaking to you directly right now, what you don't understand is all you're doing is compounding the problem that got you to lose 100,000 votes. You're not helping your party with your blind confidence and insistence that everything the PNM does is correct. The PNM was not born in boardrooms. It was born in the hearts of the working class, the forgotten, the dreamers, and the doers. That is the PNM. Doesn't seem that way right now. I mean, just look at Stuart Young and some of the decisions and statements he's made within the last year. 6 months. Now, case in point, Marvin Gonzalez, right, going up for the post of chairman under Penalty Backle's slate, he's pointed the fact that not everybody agreed with the decision to call an election. His reporter saying the majority of PNM MPs and senators did not agree with the decision to call an election. I myself, I don't think I would agree with it in hindsight. I can't remember what my stance was, but I felt I didn't see, there was some short-term gains, but I was going to be very fast. The general counsel, and he said the party leadership was disconnected from the membership. I also feel that parts of the membership are disconnected from the rest of the country. More on that in a bit, right? He suggested the leadership of the party ignored the grassroots members' claims that the party was not yet ready for an election. If we only listened and if our leaders had the humility to listen, the PNM would have been preparing for its third term in governance. That, I'm not going to say that that's a guarantee, but the idea that the result would not be what it is, might have still lost. I think they didn't have to lose by this much. They didn't, but they did. The governance part, the communication part, the time under Dr. Youth Rowley, I don't think is responsible for why they lost by this much. And this is the key point. Had we kept our general council as a space where dissenting voices are heard, because when Penelope says that we lost touch, but we didn't lose our way. Once you are incapable of tolerating dissenting voices, which essentially started, to be fair, under Mr. Manning, right? But there are times when dissent goes too far. And it's a fine line of dealing with dissenters that go too far and not shutting the door to the possibility of allowing dissenters in order to maintain healthy perspective within your organization. But I feel ultimately, some of these things are lost to too many people that are still holding on. And one of the things that I don't like about the opposition leader is the fact that part of our state is Faris Alwari. And I think, first of all, no one thought he deserved senior counsel, as far as I'm aware, outside of the PNM. And I don't think, I'm not too sure how many people in the PNM were willing to publicly state and make a case that he deserves senior counsel. That's point number one. Point number two, no one thinks he was a good attorney general. I have yet to see anyone try to make that case publicly after we could see the totality of his time as attorney general. And point number three, as PRO of the party, he was an abject failure. As local government minister, he was an abject failure. He didn't have to be, you know. He actually did. He actually started off okay, and he aborted his own good initiatives before he could see any fruit because he didn't actually know what he was doing. He only did it for the spin. And him having a role in the opposition leader's slate for PNM executive, to me, he's just there for the politics, not political strategy, not because there's merit of what he brings to the table. What he brings to the table is not necessarily anything inherent with his ability. It's inherent to his family name, his family history, whatever resources or political influence that comes with that, whatever clique he may or may not belong to. But to say that this is the choice of doing good work, that's a tough sell. That's a really, really hard sell. I literally do not have any evidence that could support that premise. So why is he there? So now the question is, to what degree do you subjectively assess that his participation compromises the integrity of his slate? A little bit, a lot. That's subjective. Can't really speak to that. And it makes me wonder if the opposition leader herself is hamstringing or undermining in the long run herself, similar to how, and maybe we'll get onto this tomorrow, with regards to the situation between Labour versus government, the current administration is with regards to how it joins together with the unions and what promises it made up front in advance before the election without knowing the full picture of the economic position of the country to the unions. That's why they have to say we'll find the money for that. But before the break, with what little time we have left, in order to kind of try to put some of what I said here in a different perspective, I have a clip to show. This is from a podcast. It has two gentlemen whose ability and respect opinions I don't always agree with, Bilma and Tim Pool, and they're speaking with regards to the media landscape that to some extent it already happened. They're speaking in the past tense, but it's still very relevant today because the effect on today, and it has an effect on us locally. So bear that in mind. They're going to be speaking about America, but it has affected us. For more, it's time to cue this.
Even you can't ever be so purist as to think, well, you know, the people, the good people, I mean, that's one of our big problems, I think, politically. It's like this idea that we're the good people. We know we know what's good, and anyone who doesn't agree with that, well, they're an existential threat to America, and that happens on both sides.
I agree, but you know, it is a weird position for me to be in. I was talking to some friends before the show, and I was saying, like, I think that if you and I discussed policy solutions for the country, I'd probably be to the left of you. But
in some ways, yeah.
Probably most
ways. You like
ways.
Bernie.
I did.
I like Bernie, but I don't want socialism in America. We need more than what we have. We already have plenty.
But the issue is, today I feel like what defines someone politically is not, it's not the policies they want, but it's what they believe to be true.
Correct, exactly. Yeah, Matt Taibbi writes about this.
I'm a big fan. He's amazing.
Yeah.
And they call him far right now.
I sure don't agree with everything he says. I mean, I think he's wrong about Russiagate and a lot of other stuff. But first of all, he's just funny. He can say things that make me LOL. I cannot say that about many writers. Just the choice, like, description of something in one or two words is just very often just priceless. He writes so well about this and about how the modus operandi of news organizations used to be informing the public, and then it became audience stroking. How can we interpret this thing that just happened in such a way that our audience will give us likes?
Yep.
I like that. I like you said it that way. I like your point of view because that's what I already think, and I hate them, and so I like.
He's right.
He's right.
Yeah.
No, and it's just.
I worked for ABC. Started ABC New Division did a joint venture in 2014 called Fusion, and I was at Vice, and I moved over there, and then they told me that the new trend was going to be called mission-driven storytelling, and I said, "What does that mean?" And they said, "There's no such thing as objectivity. Everyone is subjective. So we're going to tell the stories that our audience wants to hear." I had a meeting with the president, and he was talking to me about this, and I said, "Does that mean if there is a news story that is true and important, we would choose not to report it because it might upset our audience?" And he said, "Yeah, I think that's fair." The company went bankrupt. They fired everybody. But this wasn't unique to them. They were chasing the trend. One of their marketing guys told me explicitly, "We want to maximize shares because we have to maximize views. We have to maximize views because we've already sold a set amount to the advertisers. One company bought 500,000 views from us. We don't complete that contract until those views are delivered. How do we deliver them? Angering moms. Middle-aged women who are angry share more than anyone else, so we're going to write stories that do that." That's actually what he told me. So it was social justice, it was racism.
So, in their case, it's angry moms. In our case, what is it? It seems fairly obvious, right? It's racial politics. You get one race to be angry at the other race's politicians. You get one side to be angry at the other side. And when Bill Maher pointed out, and that was one of the key points in what he had to say, people want to hear what they already believe in. That's what's good news now in 2025. It's around the world, and to some extent, that's happening here in TNT. I want to hear what people that agree with me, because I am morally right, and I assume that I know better than everybody else that does not agree with me. Therefore, if there's anybody in the news media giving an opinion that I don't agree with, they have to be wrong. And I do wonder if, to some extent, because when they speak about it in North America, it does not necessarily go to or speak to the politicians. I don't think they speak about politicians quite in this way, but I would argue that that's what we're seeing in our own politicians, where they, for whatever reason, and maybe the UNC was better at this coming up to the election, and that's why you could potentially say that there was a bit of a radical shift in how they operated once they won the election compared to when they were in opposition. Because when they were in opposition, it was a lot of UNC people who, they were party people. They were there to toe the party line and to present the party position. And it was a obstructing for the sake of it, opposing for opposing's sake. But now with regards to John Jeremy and Mr. Surat Singh and all the others, well, I might be mistaking the name there of the Minister of Planning. I apologize. But the point is, you have these technocrats now, to some extent, who are not party people for the last 10 years, and in some cases are former PNM people. Like, that's a very different dynamic, right? You're not necessarily sipping the Kool-Aid and believing in your own, you know, hype with regards to what perspective you listen to when you make decisions. And it potentially that's what the UNC was falling for that trap before, but at least in that window of the cabinet, they didn't. And they might fall for that trap again moving forward already. With regards to when you start to be defensive, so you start to say, well, the other side is wrong. I mean, the Prime Minister did it just now, when she basically dismissed Dr. Amy Brown out of hand. Now, there are practical reasons why it was fine for her to do so, but the language that she picked, it arguably started to make the decision look like more of an emotional one, and one based on the two sides of our politics, and not objectively based on, well, this is not going to work, and this is why it's not going to work practically, so we have to say no. Because there is that practical side to it, obviously. But the emotion in the response suggests it's more than that. At the end of the day, you're our enemy. And we can't afford to have you do anything for us, because we don't want you to. Because you're opposed to us, so we're opposed to you. And we could never meet in the middle. And we have to make that known all the time. All the time. It's almost like if politicians fear that they might think that maybe we're getting too soft, so we have to make it known all the time that we're combative against the other side. And then to some extent, that's what people want to see on the news. I mean, you do it for sports, right? If my team is losing, I'm less interested in watching the commentary on the sport, even the commentary on other teams, because my team is losing and I feel bad. So I don't want to engage as much. Why not the same thing with politics? And then the internet makes it more nefarious, because you will continue down the rabbit hole of what you like. And hence why Bill Maher said, give us likes, we like that. And then the algorithm will keep feeding you that. I generally have a bit of a balance in my feed, although I honestly don't look at most of the stuff that is given to me on either side. And there's certain people who every now and then I'll take a glance, you know, maybe the headline is a little too hyperbolic, so I'll leave it alone. Maybe sometimes the issue is important enough that I want to check it out, see what they have to say. Do I agree with it? Do I don't? I don't always agree with everything Tim Pool and Bill Maher says, or Dave Rubin, or Jordan Peterson, or Ben Shapiro, or Candace Owens, or Rachel Maddow, or Joe Scarborough, or oh gosh, I forget the brother of the former governor of New York, or Wolf Blitzer, although he doesn't seem to be as incendiary, or Anderson Cooper, who generally I do have reasonable respect for Mr. Anderson Cooper. So we have to be careful that we don't, because I've already seen cheerleading in media already, which I find it has little to no value. But to some extent, that was a lot of our political talk. Just before Talking Point, I remember when I tried to get in this space a few years before, I was basically told it's all bacchanal, and that was kind of disappointing. And hopefully, I don't descend into bacchanal too much here on this show. That's not the intent. It's hard to keep emotions 100% out of it. I understand that. But there's a difference between, okay, I'm emotional because of an issue and how it was handled, as opposed to I'm emotional because I don't like that guy or that woman. It's not the same thing. And right now, I feel as though the PNM are playing to the minority. They're playing to their base, which is not as big as they thought it was, or it shrunk. And in the past, they got away with playing to their base, and to some extent, the UNC also plays to their base. But the problem is, maybe in the past, the base is 300,000, now the base is 200,000. And it seems as though the only person that really gets it might be the opposition leader, maybe Marvin Gonzalez, and maybe a couple other people who have not gone out of their way to say stuff that makes the PNM look arrogant. And while the opposition leader says we lost touch, but we didn't lose our way, some of them, it makes the PNM look like it lost their way. And like I said, it's not as though other politicians are immune to this. And that's why we can't just assume our side is right. So let's just say you voted for Kamala, you voted for somebody on her slate. I'm not saying who I voted or didn't vote for. Now we have to, because we did that, we don't want to be wrong. So because we don't want to be wrong, we'll double down and triple down. Let's just say if this government goes off the rails. Trump supporters are going to double down and triple down on Trump. Not everything he does is going to be right, but they're going to excuse the things that he does wrong, and they're going to hype up the things he does right. Similar to Bernie, similar to Obama, similar to Bush, similar to Clinton. I'm not of the business to excuse things that politicians do wrong, and I'm going to have a side, I'm going to pick one, and then I'm going to hype up everything they do right. When the PNM did things right, we appreciated it. When they did things wrong, we called it out. Same thing here. And that's what, I guess, ultimately, to some extent, that's not necessarily be all and end all, but that's what I want out of the benefits of a show like Talking Point, hopefully to encourage more shows that strive for objectivity in whatever approach you take so that the national conversation can be more objective. Unfortunately, WSN is a media house that allows me the leeway to go as far as I feel I need to go at times and does not control what I say, how I say it, when I say it. Once it's responsible, that's all they want out of me. Once I'm not at Awajang. All right. We want to take a break. We have a comment. I don't know if you can put the whole thing up on your screen, but I'll read it out now. We're having some technical issues, but hopefully you can see this. If not, it's kind of long. America would not have seen the PNM as an ally against Maduro because historically the PNM never interferes in the internal affairs of other countries. Not so the UNC that have been anti-Maduro for some time. Given this scenario, surely the US would use this to their advantage and support the UNC. The question is, in return for this support, would the US make demands of the new UNC government to advance USA's interests? Doesn't seem like it. Our government has some very middle-of-the-road positions internationally. We're not a big player, obviously, but, you know, China and USA put some effort into us. I think, though, I wouldn't mind if the demands made on the government is with regards to transnational crime. Because whenever we have a drug bust, usually they talk about the fact that agents from the DIA, FBI, ATF, DEA, sorry, FBI, ATF were involved. American law enforcement agencies. And that's probably the only reason why we get those cocaine holes. You never hear about cocaine being picked up by the Coast Guard or TTPS alone, or National Security Intelligence Services alone. And it's not that I think that we're incapable. It's I think that there's too many people in all the wrong places with a vested interest for those kinds of operations to not succeed. So when you have the Americans, it's kind of hard to tell them, well, no, but I'm getting 100,000 on the back end. I can't arrest these people. You're going to tell them that? No, you're not going to tell them that. Because all of a sudden, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Homeland Security in this case, and National Defense, and the various bigwigs, they're going to be told, hey, we have a thing. Let's do this thing now. Or are you part of the corruption? So the Prime Minister is going to be like, whoever the Prime Minister at the time is going to basically say, no, I'm not part of the corruption. And whoever's part of the corruption is basically going to have to explain to their other bosses why they can't stop the law enforcement activities that confiscated their $20 million worth of cocaine. But notice how few and far between that is. I mean, the U.S. Coast Guard got another 135 million, I think, somewhere else in the Caribbean. But now the question is, to what extent did all of that travel through Trinidad and Tobago and up the islands to get to wherever the Coast Guard eventually intercepted it? The PNM never interferes in the internal affairs of other countries. Technically speaking, its non-committal situation or its support of Maduro was in a way interfering because it was propping up a regime that I think is of questionable integrity. But of course, they're not going to see it like that. It's one of those things where, you know the saying, evil prevails when good men do nothing? Because it's not like good men are saying, no, we want evil to prevail. Sorry, it's not like people are saying, we want evil to prevail. Not saying that. It's easier not to have to do things. It's easier to just let Venezuelans be and let Venezuela be. We can't do anything about that, which is funny because when the Caribbean is ready, we'll take positions in the UN about all kind of things that we have no power over, right? But here we are, Trinidad and Tobago, our neighbors, Venezuela. We have thousands of illegal immigrants fleeing due to the economic situation of Venezuela. Because they're trying to survive. And they're coming here, and we can't accept them all. But no. Nicolas Maduro is the duly and legitimately elected representative of Venezuela. Yes. Even Karen back then pointed out the fact that Dr. Keith Rowley did not want to call the immigrants refugees. And I do think to some extent it might not have been appropriate at the time, particularly, I don't know if you would call them, as much as I think the politics over there is in a mess, most people that come over there are not political asylum seekers. They're people looking for economic opportunities because of the lack of economic opportunities in Venezuela at this point in time. A country that has so much natural resources, it should legitimately be maybe the second richest country in the Western Hemisphere. And let's not forget, we used to be third. We used to be the third. Used to. Past tense, I do believe. Per capita. So, it was easier for us to do nothing because we need Dragon. That worked out so well. Yeah. The problem is when you sell your principles off for practical interests and practical interests don't go through, you're left with a whole lot of nothing, but you also sold out your principles. Unless you're saying that, politics has the morality of its own, and international politics is a whole other level that I think a lot of people, including the academics over this whole Venezuela Trinidad thing, don't fully understand. Which is strange to me because I don't understand why they don't understand. Unless they're so caught up in academia, they could only deal with things in hindsight. So we are where we are. Hopefully the phone lines, can't necessarily see if the phone lines are open, but they're open. You could call and have you say what time we have left. Of course, I believe we should be under a yellow level alert. And basically from the start of the talking point, there have been quite a bit of rain. Not necessarily too heavy, but it's just one of those things. I like the rain. I like the rain because it's relief from the sun and the heat. And I rather be cool than warm most of the time, right? Most of the time. Don't always like drive in the rain. Yes, there's inconvenience there if I have anything to do, but generally speaking, I like the rain. The problem I have with liking the rain is I live in a country where enjoying rain is difficult when I know that potentially somebody, either right now or in a few minutes or in a few hours, may lose 5 to 20 grand of their net worth because their house flooded and appliances or furniture got destroyed. And depending on how bad the rains are, it could get worse on an individual basis and then on an aggregate of all the individuals and the total basis on the population. And I was going to speak about the politicizing the school issue, save that for tomorrow. But to some extent, I do fear, and I'm hoping that the Minister of Local Government will continue on a course that proves that she's going to be different than the former or the last local government minister. And it's not, to be fair to Faris Awari, it's not as though he had an unlimited budget to deal with things, right? And the whole situation with local government reform and property tax was done so poorly that it never made it to the local government coffers, which probably makes the local government implementation in hindsight unethical. But it's hindsight, so I'm being kind of technical here. It didn't actually do what they said it was going to do, and what they said was the justifiable reason
Gentlemen, morning.
For its existence.
Hello?
So.
Hello? Hello?
I like the rain, but I don't like it when it rains. I like the cool, how it cools down the country, but I don't like it when it potentially harms our people. We have a call on the line. Hopefully, it could come through. Good morning, caller.
Yes.
Morning.
Morning. Are you hearing me?
Yes. Go ahead, caller.
Okay. Once this is Diego Martin, it's echoing, so I'm not too sure why.
We're okay.
But if you're hearing me clearly, I will continue. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I want to talk. No, sorry about it. I'm hearing too much echoes, so I had to come off. Something wrong with the connection.
Okay. For what it's worth, I wasn't any echoes, but I don't know if the broadcast, it was going off in the broadcast. So try again. It wasn't going out. I was told it wasn't going out in the broadcast. So call back and if you could kind of just fight through it and you could just say what you have to say and ignore the echoes, that'll be fine so that you could say your piece. But yeah, I mean, the rain, it's a little bit heavier now and I just can't help but sit here and be worried.
All right. I'm here, Diego Martin.
All right, Diego Martin in line. Morning.
Okay, good morning. No, it cannot work, Sean, because I'm hearing a lot of myself repeating itself with your conversation, and it's not my TV. My TV is muted. So there's some sort of echoing within the system, and your landline apparently is busy. So that's possibly done also. Okay, so I'm coming off now. Bye.
All right. I think we lost the caller again. Not too sure what the technical issues are. Maybe there's water in the line. Caller, do we have you? All right. It's a shame. I don't even know exactly why he called in, so I can't even speculate on the point he was going to make or what topic he wanted to speak on, which is unfortunate. But, c'est la vie. As I was saying, though, I think one of the things that we need to understand and not take for granted is at some point we got complacent. There were those people whose homes flooded and there were those people whose homes almost never flooded still. Depending, you may still have to deal with flood waters, give or take, right? Where I live, it's next to a pretty deep river, canal. So there's only ever been flooding in my area maybe a handful of times. It's not that it hasn't happened. It has happened. But we haven't necessarily suffered major losses because of it. But I think one of the things that society, the traps that we fall into is that we say, well, it doesn't happen or it never happens that bad, so it wouldn't. So first of all, the fact that it doesn't happen to you doesn't make it fine. But also, part of the reason why we have to be prepared and do a better job on matters like flooding, flood prevention, and drainage, and all of that, is the fact that while it is affecting some people, and as a society, we should try to help the people that need help, because if we all pull together, we're stronger and we can accomplish more. Venezuela is a larger country. They can accomplish more technically. But also that mistake of, well, it's happening to thee and not to me. No, but it could always happen to you. That's the argument with regards to political persecution. I didn't say anything when they went after this one. And I didn't say anything when they went after this one. And then by the time they come after me, there's nobody left to speak for me. And that basic premise runs true for national issues. What happens if you're the last place left that isn't affected by heavy rain significantly? Well, by the time you're ready to complain, everybody else will look at you and say, what are you complaining for? Get in line. Because when you could have supported us, even when you weren't in need, you didn't. And we were left to fend for ourselves. So now, get in line, because we've been waiting for help a lot longer than you. This has been an issue for us a lot longer than you. And it's a hell of a way to live when I'm just here sitting in my house, listening to the rain. And it's supposed to be a soothing experience, right? It's supposed to be something that, you can sip your coffee, read a book, fall asleep. A lot of people like to sleep with the rain, right? It doesn't have the same amount of noise pollution. And I'll get to a comment to close the show about that in a bit. It's cooler, it's darker. It's more relaxing, it's more comfortable, it's cozier. We enjoy the rain here, traditionally in Trinidad and Tobago, right? Except, I have a hard time enjoying life when I know people are suffering. I had a hard time going on with my day when I found out what happened to the guys in Paria. I had a hard time enjoying my night when I found out that a former colleague died in a very weird accident on the road while he was working. I have a hard time enjoying the rain when I think about the fact that there are potentially people in this country who are going to suffer because of this very peaceful sounding rain. And when you think about it from that perspective, it's kind of ridiculous how bad the problem has been allowed to get. And this is why the government changed, because you want someone to fix it, not someone to make a political issue out of it, or to try to mama guys about what they are or are not doing over it. Because I do believe the problem with PNM was not that they were making it into a political issue that they didn't want to deal with. It was that they were trying to talk around the issue that they didn't know where they were going to get the resources from to deal with this problem. They didn't know how to explain that to us. They didn't necessarily have a proper vision to how to prioritize resources on a whole. And now we have to wait and see long term, because we saw the Minister of Local Government and Minister of Works have an initial burst, but that's a sprint. A 5-year term is a marathon. Can you sustain that level of activity with regards to what you prioritize in your budget moving forward? Have no idea. Because right now they're still working off the PNM budget. So it's very difficult to assess the current government fully with the current economic situations. can they sustain that and deal with these things while also spending money where they want to spend money on their passion projects? I have no idea. But I'll close with this. Not too sure if we could take any calls. This is one of the reasons why I apologize once again for not being in studio. Oh, we have a caller, so we'll take the call. Morning.
Hello.
Morning, caller.
Good morning, Sean. How are you going today?
It's an interesting day.
Yes, yes. You know, Sean, I hear what you're saying about flooding and stuff, eh? One of the shortcomings of Trinidad and Tobago, well, let me say Trinidad, is that all the previous governments have not come to terms with the geography of Trinidad. And that is the problem. We have some areas where the hills drain into the valleys and what we call the plains.
Yeah.
We have an increasing population. So the population is expanding and we have to they have to find places for them to live. But we are on an island. So we are limited in terms of where we go and how we go where we go. And it's time they come to terms with that and do things that will make it easier for us to exist on this island with all the natural conditions that occur every year, vis-a-vis flooding, vis-a-vis rain. And none of them have seen it fit to put this into the strategic planning of this country. For instance, you talk about where you live. You live more upstream and you still getting flooding periodically. What happens to the people downstream over the years? Look at it and you'll see how downtown Port of Spain and have been flooding more and more and more.
Yeah.
Because there is no planning. And we have to start to deal with this issue. And sometimes I don't like to bring this up, but let me say this about Singapore. Singapore, 5 million people living on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's less than half the size of Trinidad. But what you have to do, you have to look at the conditions and see if we have to exist here, we have to come up with strategies to deal with it. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. It's that's the thing. Like some of the low areas, flood-prone areas, reclaimed areas, and the lower areas on the gradient to the reclaimed areas, because I think that's what's happening to Woodbrook in those areas near the savannah, right? I mean, that's where people who take their driver's license tests in Port of Spain, the hill test, at least back in my day, used to be on a little incline, no longer than a car, right? Coming from one of those side streets that goes up to the roads there right next to the stadium. And I'm not saying movie town. It's just that when you're gonna reclaim the land and you're gonna put more stuff, why did we not see certain, and I'm not talking like a basic box drain, real drainage infrastructure put in place to say, and this is where, because the land, I mean, the surveys could probably say the land is lower here. Everyday people, myself included, ain't looking at things that way, right? But the land is lower here and it's higher there. And the sea is on the other side of the higher land. So what are we going to do about it? And if you do things up front, one, it's not going to cost as much as trying to retrofit things. And two, it's not going to cost as much as when you try to pay for the flood damage. And in some cases, private citizens have to pay for the flood damage, not the government. But our lack of ability to properly communicate with our politicians, or their lack of willingness to listen to us, because, hey, They don't want to listen to haters. They only want to hear people that like them. The people only want to hear the people that agree with them. So why can't the politicians only want to hear supporters that agree with them? They don't want to hear about dissenting supporters. Back to what Marvin Gonzalez said, that the General Council was not a place for dissent, that the cabinet, that the parliament, government parliament was not a place for dissent, apparently. I'm paraphrasing him and maybe putting words as well, but that's my interpretation, right? And back to the video that I gave where they don't normally speak about their politicians that way, but I'm willing to. We only want to hear what we like, to affirm ourselves, because our egos are too fragile to hear anyone say anything that can imply maybe we were wrong. And with regards to flooding, yeah, it's a long-term problem. It's technically not solely on the feet of Dr. Drawley and Ron Sinanan and Faraz Hawari and Stuart Young and Coleman Burt, but they didn't necessarily show anything better than. Now, again, so that's why I said what I said. You know, are we going to see better than out of this government? Because it's not going to be cheap. And that's one of the reasons why the question of how you're going to pay for the things that you already promised is important. Because there are things they didn't promise that arguably, at least some people in the population think is necessary. And it's not just flooding in Port of Spain. It's also flooding in all over Central and South. You don't think it's necessary to deal with flooding? Technically speaking, when we ask the question, how are you going to afford all that? I don't believe those things were line items of the conversation with regards to financial resources to be committed to. Okay, I said we'll end with I don't want to end the show without the comment on noise pollution. So this was sent at the top of the show. So I don't want to let, I don't want to wait till the next show. Sean, this was all night tonight. It's 11:50. The loud music continues. Or rather, we saw it at the top of the show. This is Monday night. We have to be up early in the morning. These people are so inconsiderate. I cannot go into my bedroom. This is under my bedroom windows. I did pass the message on. This is a previous commenter. First of all, because the comment asked, I don't know what I should do next. Maybe I should write the AG, the Prime Minister, the Commissioner of Police, the Minister of Homeland Security, I believe in this case. Look, yeah, you should try your MP, go to your local government people, go to the police again. If you know a lawyer that can give you free legal advice, try that first. If not, consult a lawyer. I understand you've done some of these things already. If you're willing, do an interview. Potentially, we could even do it anonymously where we modulate your voice and we kind of pixelate your face so that you're not seen publicly. Do an interview. So it doesn't just have to be with us, because I will always recommend that if you can, reach out to everybody you could think of. And this is for any issue, for anybody with any issue. Reach out to any and everybody you could think of. All government services at all levels, all politicians at the local, parliamentary, cabinet level, right? The line minister and the prime minister, and any minister in the office of the prime minister, and any minister in the office of that line ministry, and the MP of your area, all your local government representatives, all of the board or the corporation members, everybody, any corporation executive or leadership or whatever, reach out to any and everybody, but also all state agencies, but also all media houses. So I say we could interview you if you want. You could come in, we could do it anonymously, pre-record it. It won't be live. We could show it. We could post it on social media. But you could ask potentially who else is willing to do that. I mean, it's up to you. Do what you're comfortable doing. Do what you can afford to do, obviously. If you can't afford it, that's unfortunate. That is one of the downfalls of life. But if you can and you're willing to put the effort in, the best thing would be to nag until you can get some answers. The problem is talking point technically can't just be devoted to one issue. So we can only speak about it so much, right? But if I was suffering a situation like that, I would have license to speak on it more because it's my actual experience. You're actually experiencing it, so it's more pertinent that you speak on it. I could give you the facility to speak on it, but I can't speak on it for you all the time and not speak on other things. That's right. And now there's a balancing act for our local media. At what point do you move on and not speak about the story, or do you update it? How frequently you do it with regards to the news cycle to keep certain stories alive? It's a give or take, because for every story you put on air, you potentially are not speaking about something else that's important, right? But I understand your frustration. I myself don't have anything concrete to give you, because to some extent our faith on matters like this in the hands of the government, and right now there's a lack of political will and societal will to deal with it. And as one of the callers about a couple of weeks ago mentioned, the fact this needs legislative change. And one of the things that we haven't heard of beyond the immediate with regards to the Auditor General report, which I don't think has come in and has been made public, the mid-year budget review and the standing ground legislation, we don't know what the long-term legislative agenda is by the government. I would hope this is one of those things, but the more things come on the plate of the administration, the more I fear that they're not going to be able to deal with everything efficiently enough. And as much as they want to say that we're going to hit the ground running and whatever they said to the effect of how they're going to handle things off the jump, I fear they're slowing down. Partly because this thing, like this Venezuelan thing, comes out of left field and they have to deal with it and spend time on it. And ironically, we may have more important issues to deal with. And the back and forth between various stakeholders over this might not really be useful at that point if it's distracting the government. Or to what extent is this a distraction by the government so that we don't think about things like noise pollution and flooding? I don't know. That's the cynic. That's what we would have said back during the previous administration. Will that hold true with this administration? We don't know, but that's all the time we have for today. So I want to thank the people who have posted comments on our social media, of course, and our callers. I apologize again to, I believe, Digger Martin. I don't know what the technical issue was because the second caller came through pretty clear. Again, apologies. It could be because I am doing the show via Zoom, so the technical setup is not quite the same. It's not quite as simple. To our guys in Master Control who do a good job. Thanks to them for helping me out with me not being able to make it to the studio for this morning's show. But with that said, we'd just like to wrap things up and say to stay safe, especially in the rain. As much as it seems peaceful, I can't take it for granted that it's going to be something that we will all easily get through. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other, because let's just say the state breaks down, then it's going to be up to each and every one of us to try to support each other when the government is unable or unwilling to deal with our problems. Try and have a good day. Hopefully, those of us who can't enjoy the rain will enjoy it, and there won't be too many of us that will be suffering because of it. And never forget, it's nice to be nice. And ironically, this is one of the times when you see the best of us come to the forefront to help those in need when homes get flooded out and people get stranded by the floodwaters. We see some of our very best step up and meet the needs of our people because it's nice to be nice. And if we remember that, we'll see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience.
Give us a call
at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
Where good private health care is affordable.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.